Yang Kai had been waiting for this very moment. So how could he let the wood spirit escape now? With the help of his space secret technique, he appeared right in front of the wood spirit and stared at it with a cold look in his eyes. Then, he spread his hands and brought them together, creating an enormous moon blade. Just when Yang Kai was about to release the moon blade to give the wood spirit the final blow, the wood spirit let out a scream, and right then, Yang Kai felt a sudden burst of sharp pain from his arm, causing his wrist to momentarily shake and disrupt the moon blade's launch. Immediately after, loud slicing noise rang. Even though the huge moon blade was formed using space force and wasn't exactly a counter to the wood spirit, its might could not be taken lightly. Yang Kai's aim might have been disrupted at the last moment, causing him to miss the wood spirit's vitals, but the moon blade still left a huge gaping cut on its body. The cut was clean and some green blood gushed out from the wound like a fountain. It was then that Lu Yen swooped in, transformed into a giant ball of flame, and engulfed the entire wood spirit. The nearby Moon Inspect Queen brought its dual swords together and made a slashing motion that created a giant sword wave that cut straight into Lu Yen and the wood spirit. The wood spirit immediately let out a sharp and piercing scream. Yang Kai, on the other hand, backed off several dozen meters as he hurriedly tore off his clothes and stared at his right arm, calling out in shock in the next moment, "Wood spirit seed!" At this moment, there was a light green rice grain-sized thing embedded in the skin of his right arm, and Yang Kai could feel his vitality uncontrollably flowing towards it. As more and more of Yang Kai's vitality flowed into it, this little seed actually showing signs of breaking out of its shell. Yang Kai immediately understood what it was. Obviously, this wood spirit seed had penetrated his flesh along with that faint green beam of light from before. No wonder even the 6 emperors were unable to completely eradicate the wood spirit. It was actually able to conceal one of its seeds this well. Yang Kai couldn't even find it after carefully inspecting his body twice. If it wasn't for the wood spirit trying to interfere with his attack just now to save itself and escape, perhaps this wood spirit seed would not have activated. And it was exactly because of the activation of this wood spirit speed that Yang Kai's moonblade lost its accuracy. As for what happened to the cultivators parasitized by the wood spirit seeds in Maplewood City, Yang Kai couldn't be any clearer. All this thing needed was a short time to devour a cultivator's vitality and essence before it took over that cultivator's body and turned them into a wood spirit clone without any will of its own. Naturally, Yang Kai didn't want to follow in those people's footsteps. Seeing the wood spirit seed devouring more and more of his vitality, Yang Kai grit his teeth and formed a minute-space blade on his fingers before slicing into the flesh around where the wood spirit seed was embedded and tearing it out, trying to stifle his pained groan in the process. Blood streamed down his arm. Having been separated from his body, the small piece of flesh that Yang Kai had just torn out was devoured by the wood spirit seed in a very short time. The next moment, the wood spirit seed also turned into a small seedling that shot out some thin vines that tried to invade Yang Kai again. Yang Kai let out a cold snort and immediately summoned his sealed world bead before slipping inside it. Inside the small sealed world, Yang Kai held the wood spirit seedling as he released flames from his palm, completely wrapping it up. Accompanied by a sharp and piercing screech, the incomplete wood spirit clone was burnt to ashes. After doing all this, Yang Kai took out a healing pill from his space ring and swallowed it before sitting down cross-legged and beginning another careful examination of his body, using the small sealed world's principles to dramatically boost his senses. He was truly wary of these wood spirit seeds. He was unable to find any hidden wood spirit seeds with his divine sense earlier, but things were completely different inside the sealed world bead. Here, he could use the world principles to perform a much more intensive examination than his diving sense could perform alone. After checking a few times, Yang Kai was finally sure that there weren't any more, and he finally relaxed. After this brief period, the wound on Yang Kai's arm had almost recovered. His golden blood had extraordinary restorative properties, and coupled with his powerful physique, this kind of minor injury was nothing to him. After heaving a sigh of relief, Yang Kai stood up and left the sealed world bead. After returning back to the plains again, Yang Kai looked around and found the surroundings at peace, lacking any sounds of fighting. Not too far away, Lu Yen, who had already taken her human form, gently jumped to Yang Kai's side as a smile finally appeared beautiful face that was usually as cold as ice. Standing next to him, she happily shouted, "Master!" Yang Kai nodded and asked, glancing at the ashes on the ground, "Is it dead?" Lu Yen nodded, "Yes." While speaking, she turned her eyes towards the monster insect queen and calmly said, "Master, your new helper is pretty good. She's even fiercer than me." Yang Kai glanced at her and seemed to notice something in her gaze, causing a smile to appear on his lips as he said, "Although it's quite good, its room for growth is very limited. In the future, it will reach the third-order Dao source realm at best, but you are different. You have gained sentience and you can actively strengthen yourself, so you will definitely be stronger in the future." "Yes, Master," Lu Yen responded, lowering her head, but she couldn't hide the corners of her lips rising into a small arc. Yang Kai beckoned to the monster insect queen, which swiftly flew over to him. Yang Kai then had it returned to his sealed world bead. Glancing around, Yang Kai saw that this stretch of wilderness had become a wasteland. In just half a day, 2 second-order Dao Source Realm Masters and dozens of Origin Kings had lost their lives here, causing Yang Kai to sigh slightly. Check if there are any space rings remaining. After giving the order, Yang Kai started searching with Lu Yen. Not long after, 8 space rings lay in Yang Kai's hands. These space rings belonged to Flying Saint Palace's disciples, and Yang Kai didn't pay much attention to them as he knew there wouldn't be much of value in them. Yang Kai had already collected Ning Yuanchang and Hanleng space rings, but as for Louis Ji's, it was likely destroyed in the previous fight, so there was no point searching for it, causing Yang Kai some slight disappointment. After all, the space ring of a second-order Dao Source Realm Master should have a lot of treasures in it. "Master, what do you think we should do with this?" Lu Yen asked, looking at the ship on the ground with a curious look in her beautiful eyes. After being separated from Yang Kai in the Starlight Channel, she didn't have the time to appreciate various wonders of the star boundary. She knew very little about this ship, only that it was a kind of flight-type artifact. "Of course, we're going to keep it," Yang Kai grinned, walking up to the ship and circling it a few times as a satisfied look appeared on his face. Yang Kai had personally learned how fast this thing could fly as he had been unable to catch up to it despite his best efforts just a day ago. In the subsequent battle, the defensive shield of the ship had even withstood the attacks of the Heavenly Lunar Cycle Grand Array for a time, obviously indicating that its defensive strength was also quite good. This was absolutely a Dao Source-grade flight-type artifact. Yang Kai currently lacked a flight-type artifact for traveling, so how could he let go of such a treasure after encountering it? It might belong to Flying Saint Palace, and if anyone saw Yang Kai using it, they might link him to Ning Yuancheng's death. But as long as Yang Kai was careful and didn't use it in front of outsiders, everything would be alright. The ship was too big, however, and Yang Kai couldn't refine it immediately to make it shrink, so he could only expend a large amount of his spiritual energy to put it into the sealed world bead, for now, and deal with in the future. "Let's go!" Yang Kai summoned Lu Yen and began returning to Maplewood City. Now that the matter of Lu Yen had been settled, he could accompany Kong Si Ran to explore the hidden cave mansion without any worries. But right then, a gust of wind blew over and Yang Kai, who was about to turn around and leave, couldn't help but pause, looking suspiciously in a certain direction. "What's wrong?" Lu Yen asked, surprised. Yang Kai didn't answer and instead just stared intently for a time before suddenly soaring over to where the wood spirit clone was killed. Originally, only the ashes of the wood spirit clone were left here. However, under the last gust of wind, something glimmering in the ashes had caught Yang Kai's attention. Kneeling down, he swept away the rest of the ashes and discovered something. Yang Kai instantly retreated as a vigilant look appeared on his face. In that moment, he almost instinctually released a moon blade. Lu Yen slowly came over and stood beside him, sweeping her gaze towards the ashes before a gasp leaked from her lips. "A seed!" She glanced at Yang Kai and, getting his nod, she stepped forward and reached out her fingers to pick this seed up. Upon closer examination, the pair confirmed it was indeed a seed, one the size of a grain of rice, obviously something left behind after the wood spirit was burnt to ashes. Since it could survive Lu Yan's intense flames though, this seed was clearly not ordinary. Obviously, it was a wood spirit seed, And the reason why Yang Kai showed such vigilance was all because of this. He had suffered a small loss just now and had even been forced to cut out a piece of his flesh to resolve a similar wood spirit seed crisis. Once bitten by a snake, one would be afraid of ropes for 10 years. But the strange thing was that this wood spirit seed seemed completely different from the wood spirit seed which had implanted itself in Yang Kai's arm. It wasn't green, but instead, the left side glimmered gold while the right released a dazzling silver, looking extremely unusual. Is there anything amiss with it? Yang Kai asked vigilantly. Lu Yen nodded and said, there is indeed a problem. It still has a faint soul fluctuation. It seems to still be alive. I see. Yang Kai ground his teeth. If he hadn't instantly backed away just now and had picked up the wood spirit seed instead, he might have been parasitized again. Just from the looks of it, this wood spirit seed was extraordinary, and if it had taken root in his body, he probably wouldn't have been able to deal with it by just cutting out a piece of flesh. Fortunately, he had Lu Yen, who was the nemesis of this wood spirit and didn't fear its peculiar abilities. Good. This little thing actually dares try to trick me. Yang Kai coldly smiled and beckoned Lu Yen. Come with me. Saying so, he quickly brought Lu Yen into the sealed world bead. In the sealed world bead, Yang Kai sat in a cross-legged position, looking as tranquil as an ancient well. In front of him was his purple origin furnace, with its lid closed and an intense heat coming from it. From time to time, knocking sounds could be heard coming from inside the purple origin furnace, as if something was struggling inside it, trying to escape. At this moment, Yang Kai was pouring his qi into the purple origin furnace, trying to suppress whatever was struggling inside. As time went by, the purple origin furnace turned extremely red, so hot that it began distorting the surrounding space. Meanwhile, the struggle inside the furnace was also growing weaker and weaker. After an entire day, the furnace finally calmed down. Yang Kai called for Lu Yen before opening the purple origin furnace with the wave of his hand. Immediately, Lu Yen turned into a fiery beam and shot out from the furnace before assuming her human form before him. Master, Lu Yen greeted Yang Kai and handed him the gold and silver-colored wood spirit seed before adding, Master, you may rest assured, this thing could not be any deader. Good job. Yang Kai nodded with satisfaction, taking the peculiar wood spirit seed and pouring his divine sense into it, confirming that Lu Yen was indeed right. The faint soul wisp hidden inside the wood spirit seed had completely disappeared. Obviously, the soul wisp belonged to the wood spirit, and unless it was completely destroyed, the wood spirit would continue to live on. But after being thrown by Yang Kai into the purple origin furnace and refined by Lu Yen for a full day and night, how could the residual soul of the wood spirit survive? It had long been wiped out by the scorching heat. At this moment, the seed in Yang Kai's hand could no longer be regarded as the wood spirit seed, but the original seed before the wood spirit grew from. Yang Kai had no idea what the wood spirit's actual body was before it gained sentience. After all, he had never seen a seed like this before. But since it could stand being burned by the joint effort of Lu Yan's and his flames for an entire day and night without getting damaged, it was far from ordinary. If this seed was planted, it might gain sentience again after tens of thousands of years, becoming another wood spirit, but that one would have nothing to do with the previous one. What are you going to do with this thing? Asked Lu Yen, glancing at Yang Kai. I don't know. What do you suggest? Yang Kai looked up at her. Lu Yen also shook her head. Master, that is up to you. However, I feel that the two energies flowing in this seed would bring you a great advantage. Oh? Why do you say that? Yang Kai asked in surprise. I just have a feeling, that's all. If you really want me to explain it, I can't describe it exactly. Lu Yen smiled. Yang Kai gently nodded before returning his gaze to the peculiar wood spirit seed and pondering. Suddenly, his eyes lit up as if he had come up with a good idea. The next moment, his figure flickered as he directly arrived at the medicine garden of the small sealed world. Then, he looked for a good spot, dug up a little bit of earth, and planted the wood spirit seed in his hand. He had no idea what this wood spirit seed was or what its uses were, but since that was the case, he could just grow it himself to investigate. And in this world, What place would be more suitable for planting the wood spirit seed than the medicine garden inside the sealed world bead? This was a medicine garden with a vast amount of heavy earth buried beneath it and 5 earth vein crystals supplying rich amounts of world energy. In this place, the growth period of the wood spirit seed would be greatly shortened, and in just a few years, Xianxia would be able to figure out what it was. After carefully rechecking, Xianxia clapped and smiled in satisfaction. The next moment, his figure distorted again as he reappeared before Lu Yen. It's done. Let's return to Maplewood City. Accompany me. I need to ask you some questions, Xianxia said, looking at Lu Yen. Yes. Lu Yen nodded before she turned into a fiery beam and shot straight into Xianxia's body, disappearing right after. Xianxia then left the sealed world bead, determined his bearings, and swiftly headed towards Maplewood City. Somewhere about 10,000 kilometers away from Maplewood City, Flying St. Palace. Surrounded by mountains and rising clouds, Flying St. Palace was a majestic sight to behold. And on a certain peak, an old man with a naked chest and white hair was sitting cross-legged, facing east. This old man's eyes were closed as he inhaled and exhaled slowly. Every time he breathed out, his breath seemed to transform into birds and beasts that would walk or run away, disappearing into the depths of the forest in the blink of an eye. He was clearly cultivating some strange, profound secret art. Suddenly, the old man opened his eyes and a gleam appeared in their depths, causing anyone who saw it to shudder. Humph, this old master said not to disturb him unless it was something of critical importance. Tell me, what is the matter this time? If it turns out to be something trivial, it will be your head, the old man suddenly stated in a cold tone without even turning his head. Several dozen meters behind him, a middle-aged man in black robes immediately froze as drops of cold sweat trickled down his forehead. Promptly cupping his fists, he reported in a trembling voice. Reporting to the Palace Master, young Palace Master's life crystal has shattered. Judging by the middle-aged man's words, this old man happened to be Flying St. Palace's Palace Master, Ning Bo Yang. Yuan Chen's life crystal shattered? Ning Bo Yang's expression turned colder upon hearing this, the temperature on the mountain top dropping sharply. Yes, the middle-aged man replied in a heavy voice, not daring to lift his head. Humph, that rascal's life was destined to be short from the start. Since his crystal has shattered, that's all there is to it, Ning Bo Yen indifferently said. Ah! The middle-aged man was stunned, not having expected someone to show such an indifferent attitude even after knowing that his son had died. Could it be that the young palace master wasn't really his son? The middle-aged man couldn't help wondering. Since Yuan Chang is dead, let Yuan Shu be the young palace master. See to it yourselves and stop disturbing this old master, ordered Ning Bo Yang. The middle-aged man didn't dare to be neglectful and hurriedly nodded. Yes, I will obey Palace Master's orders. However, Yuan Chang might have been a fool, but he was still my son, the young Palace Master of the Flying St. Palace. Someone daring to defecate on my Flying St. Palace's head is utterly unacceptable. Find out who is responsible and bring me his head. Yes, the middle-aged bowed respectfully. You may go, Ning Bo Yang waved. The middle-aged man immediately backed away without saying another word. In Star Soul Palace, the true overlord of the Star Boundary's southern territory, a similar scene was taking place. In a secret room, a short old man was listening to the report from a beautiful woman in front of him, and after listening to it, he furrowed his brow and asked, "Did that little bastard's life crystal really shatter?" Reporting to Honored Master, Junior Brother Han's life crystal has indeed broken. The beautiful woman respectfully replied. That evil boy was as slippery as a loach, even evading this old master's personal pursuit. So how did he die? The old man let out a cold snort. Waste! Honored Master, please restrain your anger. Junior Brother Han is already dead, and no matter who killed him, it can be regarded as cleaning house on behalf of Honored Master. The beautiful woman comforted. Cleaning house. The old man let out a cold snort and snapped. This old master does not need anyone to intervene in his affairs. Disciple has made a mistake. Please forgive me, Honored Master. The beautiful woman's face turned pale as she heard this shout. Go and investigate who did it and, while this old master cares nothing for his other possessions, your junior brother Han had a token on him. Make sure you retrieve it and bring it back to me, the old man commanded. A token? The beautiful woman was stunned, asking curiously, May I ask, honored master, what kind of token it is? The old man calmly glanced at her and said, If you really see it, you will know what it is. Explaining any more is useless. Yes, disciple will deal with this as quickly as possible. Honored master need only wait for good news. The beautiful woman hurriedly left the secret room, not daring to ask any more. After the beautiful woman left, an uncertain and pondering look appeared on the short old man's face before he suddenly cursed. Little bastard, you're lucky that you didn't die at this old master's hand. So, after you exited the Starlight Passage, you fell into the Black Blood Swamp? Xianxia asked while making a beeline toward Maplewood City. The Black Blood Swamp was not too far from Maplewood City, just 100,000 kilometers or so away, so Xianxia had naturally heard of it before. Lu Yan's voice sounded in his head. I also know that my existence can easily arouse others' greed, so I've been hiding there and didn't dare to show myself easily. What happened next? Xianxia asked. Later, I fought with many monster beasts in the swamp. Some wanted to devour me, but I managed to escape each time, though at one point when I was fighting with a certain monster beast, I was discovered by a passing master. That man had a second-order Dao source realm cultivation and not only easily killed the monster beast I was fighting, but also captured me. He then sealed me in that bowl. Lu Yan still seemed to be a little shaken as she recalled her recent encounters. Fortunately, that man's secret art was water attributed, the opposite of my essence, so he brought me to an auction being held in Maplewood City instead of keeping me for himself. It sounds like all sorts of chances and coincidences lead you here. Xianxia smiled. Indeed, many chances and coincidences played a part in helping him meet with Lu Yan again. If he didn't come to Maplewood City after escaping from the Blue Feather sect, he would have definitely missed Lu Yan. And once someone like Lu Yan was captured, she would not necessarily survive for long. She would definitely be integrated into an artifact or swallowed and absorbed by a cultivator to enhance their own strength. In any case, it's a blessing to be reunited with Master now. By the way, Master, what about Xiao? Lu Yan suddenly asked. She and Xiao were both Xianxia's helpers, his left and right arms, so to speak. She had spent many years together with Xiao, so she was quite attached to him and cared about his situation. Xianxia wore a sad look as he shook his head. There's still no news. I hope he is safe and sound. Lu Yan's tone also fell. In their native star field, they were nearly invincible existences, but after coming to the star realm, Lu Yan discovered that there were many powerful people here who she could not currently hope to match, and since even she had been captured by others, it was obvious Xiao may also be in danger. When Xianxia returned to Maplewood City, the sky was already dark. He walked into the city with ease and went straight to his secluded home. He opened the secluded home barrier and walked right in. Before he could take 2 steps, though, he heard a cheerful voice call out, Sir, you're back. Xianxia couldn't help but freeze in shock for a moment, but after turning to see who it was, he finally remembered that another person was living here now. The little girl from the Zhang family, Zhang Ruoxi. Xianxia had spent most of his life traveling alone, so now that someone was suddenly accompanying him, he was having a hard time adapting. Furthermore, he had been busy with Lu Yan these few days, so he had almost forgotten about Zhang Ruoxi. After regaining his wits, Xianxia gently nodded to her. Sir has been working hard these days. Zhang Ruoxi lowered her head and said in a low voice. Her voice was so small that, had the secluded home not been extremely quiet, Xianxia might not have heard her. Xianxia took a careful look at her and discovered that she looked a little nervous, her 2 hands pinching her clothes as she fidgeted slightly. Master, who is this little girl? She seems to be afraid of you. Lu Yan's voice rang in Xianxia's head as she continued in a teasing tone. Her strength doesn't seem too high. Master wouldn't happen to have kidnapped her, would you? But, this little girl is pretty good. She is quite a nice figure for her age. TSK. Before Lu Yen could continue any further, Yang Kai directly threw her into the sealed world bead and cut off contact with her. Inside the small sealed world, Lu Yen stood stunned for a moment before snorting, "A guilty conscience makes a man become a coward." After having said this, she searched for the location of the sun's true essence before transforming into her firebird form and flying over to it, preparing to absorb more of its sun's true fire to strengthen herself. Inside the secluded home, Yang Kai looked at Zhang Ruoxi nervously fidgeting and asked, "Have you been waiting here?" Had she not been waiting here, it would have been impossible for her to appear the moment he entered the secluded home. "No, Ruoxi just happened to be walking nearby," Zhang Ruoxi replied, lowering her head. Obviously, Yang Kai didn't believe her, but looking around and seeing that the secluded home had been cleaned up spotlessly, he couldn't help smiling and saying, "Sit down. I have something to tell you." Zhang Ruoxi hurriedly waved her hands and respectfully rejected. "No need, sir. Ruoxi will continue standing." Yang Kai heaved a sigh, reached out, and pulled her stiff body over to a chair before pushing her into it, making her sit, and only then walking around the table to sit on the opposite side. After sorting out his thoughts, Yang Kai spoke. "Ruoxi, I can call you Ruoxi, right?" Zhang Ruoxi slowly nodded her head without speaking a word. Yang Kai smiled and tried to speak in as gentle a tone as possible. "If you don't want to speak, that's fine. It's like this, I brought you out of the Zhang family not to make you repay me, nor because I want you to serve me. The connection between the Zhang family and myself was all because of the agreement I made with your great-grandfather, Zhang Gaoxian. So, now that that agreement has been fulfilled, neither the Zhang family nor I owe each other anything. Ruoxi will always remember the great benevolence Sir has shown to the Zhang family and will surely repay Sir in this life." Zhang Ruoxi stated in a soft voice, but firm, unyielding tone. Yang Kai nodded and said, "If that is what you wish. And now I want to tell you the reason I brought you out from the Zhang family is that I might need your help with something in the future." Zhang Ruoxi still had her head lowered as she stated, "Ruoxi will surely work hard to fulfill Sir's orders and expectations. Since Sir has brought me out of the Zhang family, I am no longer a member of the Zhang family, so whatever Sir needs of me, I will do it as long as it makes Sir happy." Yang Kai rubbed his forehead, feeling like he was talking to a brick wall, making him extremely helpless. In the end, he could only say, "I don't know how else to explain this to you. In any case, you don't need to address me as Sir, nor do you need to think of yourself as a servant or maid. I'm not much older than you, so just call me Big Brother Yang from now on." How could that be acceptable? Zhang Ruoxi raised her head and waved her hands frantically. When she found that Yang Kai was looking at her though, she quickly lowered her head and said, "That is absolutely impossible. Ruoxi cannot be so rude to Sir. You blockhead." Yang Kai was exasperated. Zhang Ruoxi appeared to be in a state of nervous panic, thinking that Yang Kai was angry with her, so she quickly got up in order to kneel down. Yang Kai saw her intent and swiftly reached out to make her sit back down. "Forget it, I won't pester you about these things. However, now that you will be staying by my side and I will be in need of your help in the future, I will not treat you badly. First, take this." Saying so, Yang Kai took out a jade bottle from his space ring, opened it and took out a single pill with pill veins. "What's this?" Zhang Ruoxi curiously gazed at the pill. "Poison. Do you dare to take it?" Yang Kai said in a serious manner. Once he spoke those words though, he realized he had suddenly reverted to some bad habits he'd picked up over the years and felt somewhat disgusted with himself. Zhang Ruoxi, on the other hand, just stated with a smile on her face, "Sir is lying to me." Yang Kai looked a little embarrassed but didn't try to justify himself, instead just saying, "Take this thing and go find yourself a room to cultivate in. I'm going out for a few days, so just stay here obediently and don't go running around." "Is Sir going out again?" Zhang Ruo raised her head, looking at Yang Kai as she pursed her lips and asked, "Should Roshi accompany you?" "No need. Just take care of yourself." Yang Kai got up and smiled before heading straight to the room he usually cultivated in. After Yang Kai left, Zhang Ruoxi checked the pill again, but even after examining it for a while, she was still unable to find anything special about it. Bringing it close, she sniffed it lightly, only to have her nose filled with a rich fragrance that caused her beautiful eyes to brighten. Heaven knows what crossed her mind at that moment, but after her face turned slightly red, she popped the pill into her mouth and swallowed. Just as the pill entered her stomach, it immediately melted into a stream of heat that rushed out towards every nook and corner of her body. Zhang Ruoxi's expression changed when she felt this and, not daring to act careless, she hurriedly rushed toward the smallest bedroom in the secluded home, sat down cross-legged, and started circulating her secret art. Naturally, the pill she had taken was the marrow-washing pill that Xianxia had spent several 100,000 source crystals to buy. With the help of this pill, Zhang Ruoxi's aptitude would fully blossom and the time she required to cultivate to the Origin King realm would be greatly reduced. She was quite young, but she still had some worldly knowledge, so she understood that a pill with pill veins was unimaginably valuable. Perhaps the Zhang family couldn't even buy such a pill if they sold out all of its assets. Naturally, she was very grateful for Yang Kai's generosity. Inside Yang Kai's room, after he confirmed that Zhang Ruoxi had taken the marrow-washing pill and entered a meditative state, he activated all the barriers in his room to seal it off. Next, he took out nearly 10 space rings and began to sort out his harvest. After half an hour, Yang Kai happily looked at the haul lying in front of him. From these 10 space rings, he had acquired over 8 million source crystals alone, almost 6 million of which had belonged to Han Lung. After giving it a thought, Yang Kai didn't find this surprising. At the auction, Han Lung had bid about 6 million when he was competing with Ning Yuancheng for Lu Yen. So him not having this many source crystals would have been more surprising. Yang Kai was simply ecstatic after obtaining so many source crystals. He had toiled so hard yet he could only gather 1 million source crystals over the past few months, and during the auction, he had spent a couple 100,000 to buy that washing marrow pill. Now though, he actually had over 8 million. By the looks of it, Yang Kai wouldn't need to worry about source crystals for a long time. Naturally, there were many pills as well, but these pills were of no use to Yang Kai. As an alchemist, he didn't even put these low-grade pills in his eyes. At best, they could be sold for some source crystals. There were many artifacts as well. Besides the flying ship that was lying in his sealed world bead, Yang Kai had harvested 3 other Dao source-grade artifacts. One of them was the long sword that Han Lung had used before, and even though it was just Dao source-grade low rank, it still satisfied Yang Kai greatly. The other one was an artifact armor that Ning Yuancheng possessed, refined from some material Yang Kai couldn't identify. This was similarly a Dao source-grade low-rank artifact, but because it was a defensive artifact, its value was naturally much higher than the long sword. The third and final artifact was, naturally, the black jade furnace which had just been bought by Han Lung at the auction, a genuine Dao source-grade mid-rank alchemy furnace. It had many interesting functions and Han Lung had spent a huge sum to win it, but it had now landed in Yang Kai's hands basically for free. Besides these 3 Dao source-grade artifacts, there was also an assortment of Origin King-grade artifacts. Finally, there were some materials such as herbs for alchemy and ores for artifact refining that Yang Kai neatly sorted. What caught Yang Kai's attention the most out of everything though was a small token. If I remember it correctly, this should have come from Han Lung's space ring. The token wasn't very big, only about the size of a palm, and seemed to be made of some kind of golden metal. Engraved on the front side of this token was a distinct and lifelike true dragon, while on its back was the ancient character for dragon, engraved in majestic and imposing calligraphy. Yang Kai released his divine sense and also used his chi power to carefully inspect this token, but soon realized he couldn't distinguish what material it was refined from. Searching through the information he possessed, he also couldn't recall anything about such a token. However, since it was kept inside the space ring of a master like Han Lung, the origin of this token was probably quite extraordinary. Yang Kai decisively threw it into the sealed world bead and decided to study it slowly in the future. After storing away the pills and artifacts, Yang Kai released his divine sense to check up on Zhang Ruoxi, who was using the marrow-washing pill to improve her physique. After confirming that everything was proceeding smoothly, he slowly stood up. After half a day, in the black market of Maplewood City, Yang Kai managed to clean out his inventory. The black market of Maplewood City was never short of items of less than reputable origin, and buyers here never asked any questions. So although he needed to sell them cheaper than he would in official stores, Xianxia also didn't need to worry about security or secrecy. Xianxia also didn't sell everything in just one store, but went around to several different locations to launder his goods. During the entire process, he had disguised himself and used his divine sense to shield his appearance, so presumably, with the level of cultivators in Maplewood City, no one was able to see his true appearance. After Xianxia returned from the black market, the number of source crystals in his hand had already crossed the 10 million mark, making him suddenly feel like a rich man. 2 days later, when Xianxia was refining the Dao source grade artifacts that he just got his hands on in the secluded home, his expression suddenly changed. Taking out a communication artifact from his space ring, he poured his divine sense into it, and immediately after, a smile appeared on his face and he hurriedly stood up. Soon after, he left the secluded home and headed straight towards the city gates. After half an hour, Xianxia descended into a small forest about 30,000 kilometers away from Maplewood City. Before he could look around, a familiar figure appeared in front of him and said with a grin while cupping his fist, "Brother Yang, you've come quite fast. Sorry to keep you waiting, Brother Kong." Xianxia smiled back at the opposite party and cupped his fist in courtesy. The person in front of him was naturally Kong Si Ran. After Xianxia had received his message, he immediately understood that everything was prepared. However, the two didn't set off from Maplewood City together and instead moved separately and converged here. Kong Si Ran was also a cautious person, which suited Xianxia's taste. "It's all right, I also just arrived here. Brother Yang, you came before I could even catch my breath," Kong Si Ran said with a smile. "Since Brother Yang is here, let's set off immediately." Saying so, he opened his mouth and spat out a long shuttle-like artifact, one that rapidly grew to more than 10 meters long. Kong Si Ran formed a few seals before sending a stream of source chi into the shuttle, opening a hatch in its side. When Xianxia saw this, he immediately understood that this was a flight-type artifact. Stepping inside together with Kong Si Ran, the pair soon shot off into the distance. "Sorry, Brother Yang, my flight-type artifact is only of origin king-grade mid-rank and not very fast. However, traveling this way can still save us some effort," Kong Si Ran said while piloting his shuttle. Xianxia nodded and said, "It's more than enough, but I wonder how long it will take to reach our destination?" "About 3 days or so," Kong Si Ran answered, "which is just right for me to discuss the situation there with Brother Yang." Xianxia nodded. "I was just about to ask about this." Over the next 3 days, the two remained inside the artifact, chatting, and after Kong Si Ran gave Xianxia the rundown of the situation, Xianxia finally came to know the location of the wondrous Pill Great Emperor's third disciple, Gong Sun Mu's hidden cave mansion, a place called Yuan Furnace Mountain. From a distance, this mountain looked like a giant furnace, hence its name. Yuan Furnace Mountain was situated inside Raging Fire Temple's range of influence. In his early days, Kong Si Ran had quietly gone to explore this mountain by himself, but unfortunately, he wasn't strong enough at the time to penetrate very far and could only break through the cave mansion's outer barriers. In the end, he had to leave in low spirits, completely opposite to how happily he had arrived. By his calculations, even if Gong Sun Mu's cave mansion barriers had degraded over the years, it could not be broken by an ordinary origin king. It would take at least a Dao Source Realm Master to crack it. Therefore, he had no choice but to invite Xianxia with him. Otherwise, he would be powerless to do anything due to his current limited strength. The reason why he invited Xianxia was that Gong Sun Mu was proficient in the alchemic Dao, and his hidden cave mansion would naturally be quite attractive to Xianxia. He wasn't worried that Xianxia would reject this offer, and after having been in contact with Xianxia for a few months, Kong Si Ran felt he was trustworthy. Otherwise, how could Kong Si Ran rashly invite others to collaborate for such a big matter? Even friends and relatives would stab each other in the back before such huge benefits. "Brother Kong, since Yuan Furnace Mountain is inside Raging Fire Temple's sphere of influence, we must be careful when we arrive there, lest we be discovered by Raging Fire Temple's disciples." Xianxia couldn't help but furrow his brow after listening to this point. Although his stay in Maplewood City wasn't long, he still knew a bit about Raging Fire Temple. Originally, among the great forces in the vicinity of Maplewood City, only Raging Fire Temple could compete with the City Lord's mansion because the strongest master in Maplewood City, City Lord Duan Yuan Shan, and Temple Master Luo of Raging Fire Temple, both had second-order Dao Source Realm cultivations. However, Temple Master Luo was burned to death by the ancient divine spirit Luan Feng's world extinguishing black flame at Clear Jade Mountain. As such, today's Raging Fire Temple was greatly weakened. Brother Yang, you don't need to worry about that, Kangxi Ran smiled. I asked a friend to inquire about it before coming here, and Raging Fire Temple is currently mired in internal conflicts. So how could they care about us? Why do you say that? Yang Kai was stunned. Kangxi Ran explained, Brother Yang, you should have heard that the original Temple Master Luo of Raging Fire Temple fell at Clear Jade Mountain, right? Yang Kai nodded, thinking that he hadn't just heard about it, but seen it with his own eyes. If at that time he had not hidden in the sealed world bead, he would have been buried along with Temple Master Luo as well. After Temple Master Luo's fall, Raging Fire Temple became like a handful of loose sand. The two Vice Temple Masters are now busy fighting with each other for power. Is this news reliable? Yang Kai furrowed his brow. Of course it's reliable, Kangxi Ran slightly smiled. Not to mention that they are fighting to seize power. Yuan Furnace Mountain is located at the outer edge of Raging Fire Temple's territory. When I explored it in my early years, I didn't even see a shadow of a Raging Fire Temple's disciple. So Brother Yang does not need to worry too much about this. As long as we don't act too overtly, we should not need to worry about being detected. That's good to hear. Yang Kai nodded with satisfaction. Afterwards, the two didn't talk much about this and just casually chatted. Both of them were third-order origin kings and were preparing to attack the bottleneck of the Dao Source Realm, so they had many common topics to discuss. Along the way, they exchanged their cultivation experiences and comprehensions of the Dao Source Realm and principal strength, causing time to pass by quickly. During this period, the two of them alternately piloted the shuttle so that both could restore their strength while not losing time. After 3 days, a furnace-shaped mountain caught the eyes of the duo. That's Yuan Furnace Mountain? Yang Kai asked, raising his head. Kangxi Ran looked at it with a burning hot gaze, as if he was deeply yearning for the mountain ahead. He had failed to obtain the Dao Source Fruit in the 5-colored treasure pagoda and failed to win it at the auction due to insufficient wealth. So now, all his hopes of advancing to the Dao Source Realm laid on Gong Sun Mu's cave mansion. Naturally, he very much hoped that a Dao Source Pill was stored somewhere in this secluded home. Suddenly, Kangxi Ran frowned as he focused his gaze ahead. At the same time, Yang Kai doubtfully asked, Something's not right, shopkeeper Kong. Things here seem quite lively compared to what you had expected. With Yang Kai's eyesight, he could easily spot the figures of many people moving around even if he was a few hundred kilometers away. From time to time, 1 or 2 streaks of light would fly off or land, making for a rather active scene. Kangxi Ran's face couldn't help but turn ashen as he stood suddenly. At that moment, a streak of light flew straight towards them from up ahead. Kangxi Ran's face changed as he hurriedly controlled his flight artifact to stop. Soon after, the streak of light arrived in front of the shuttle and dissipated, revealing a man who seemed to be in his 30s and had a cultivation at the second-order Origin King realm. On this man's robes was a flame-shaped emblem over his chest which was quite eye-catching. A Raging Fire Temple disciple. Kangxi Ran was shocked as he turned to Yang Kai. Yang Kai slowly shook his head, indicating for him to remain calm and not make any rash moves. At this moment, the Raging Fire Temple disciple in front shouted, "This place is the domain of my Raging Fire Temple. Friends inside this shuttle, please show yourselves." Kangxi Ran frowned, pondered for a moment, then signaled to Yang Kai before exiting the shuttle. The opposite Raging Fire Temple's disciple scanned the pair with his divine sense and found that both Kangxi Ran and Yang Kai's cultivations were higher than his own by a minor realm. But despite this, he didn't panic and simply cupped fists and said, "May I ask these two friends if you've come here to explore Yuan Furnace Mountain?" Kangxi Ran's heart clenched at that moment as he almost believed that his secret operation had been exposed. For a moment he didn't know how to answer. Fortunately, Yang Kai immediately took over the conversation and said, Indeed. Since you have come for the matter regarding Yuan Furnace Mountain, please follow me. The raging fire temple disciple didn't look surprised after hearing this and, contrary to expectations, didn't try to expel them and instead for them to follow him back to Yuan Furnace Mountain. Kong Si Ran and Yang Kai looked at each other with clear confusion. However, now that things had come to this, they could only take one step at a time. Afterwards, Kong Si Ran put away his shuttle artifact and closely followed the raging fire temple disciple with Yang Kai, flying towards Yuan Furnace Mountain. A short distance of 300 kilometers was covered in a short time. Before the trio landed on the ground, a reverberating rumble was heard coming from Yuan Furnace Mountain, as if a muffled clap of thunder was echoing inside the mountain. Kong Si Ran and Yang Kai's expressions both changed as they subconsciously protected themselves with the qi. The raging fire temple disciple who was leading the way, however, didn't seem the least bit disturbed, not stopping his pace as he simply looked up with interest. Yang Kai followed this man's gaze. The muffled claps of thunder continued echoing from bottom to top, as if something was about to rush out of Yuan Furnace Mountain. After a moment, a deafening explosion was accompanied by the thunderclap. Immediately after, a five-colored glow erupted from the peak of the mountain. This glow spread outward into the surroundings in ripples before it slowly dissipated. At the same time, Yang Kai couldn't help but take a deep breath, as a look of surprise soon appeared on his face. Such a pleasant fragrance. What is it? Kong Si Ran looked confused as he too took a deep breath. At this moment, the air was filled with a strange fragrance that made one feel calm and refreshed. His words were naturally heard by the raging fire temple disciple who was leading the way, causing him to look back at Kong Si Ran and ask, "Didn't you two come here because you were attracted by this phenomena?" Yang Kai shifted his eyes slightly but quickly replied, "That's right, but we didn't know what this was, so we simply decided to come and take a closer look. Heh. I also have no idea what exactly is causing this phenomena. I only heard from Temple Master Zong and Temple Master Lian that some kind of wondrous treasure is about to be born." Temple Master Zong and Temple Master Lian? Yang Kai couldn't help feeling confused after hearing this. They used to be the two vice palace masters of Raging Fire Temple, Zongqing and Lian Yuming. The nearby Kong Si Ran explained in a low voice. Yang Kai nodded in understanding as he gazed over quickly towards two Dao Source Realm masters standing not too far away, thinking that these two should be Zongqing and Lian Yuming. The two vice temple masters of Raging Fire Temple were first-order Dao Source Realm cultivators and had similar strength. Both of them wore the same Raging Fire Temple robes as well, so Yang Kai was fairly certain of his guess. Yang Kai suddenly recalled Zong Zijin, a youth he met at the Soaring Dragon Altar when he was exploring the five-colored treasure pagoda. Zong Zijin had a third-order Origin King cultivator and was from Raging Fire Temple, so by the looks of it, Zhong Zijin was very likely related to Zongqing, possibly even the latter's son. After a while, the strange phenomenon faded and along with it, the wonderful fragrance as well. The Raging Fire Temple disciple leading Yang Kai and Kong Si Ran beckoned to the two to land nearby. Once on the ground, this disciple cupped his fist to the two Dao Source Realm masters and stated, reporting to the two temple masters. These two were also attracted by the Yuan Furnace Mountain's phenomenon. Having heard his report, the taller one of the two Dao Source Realm masters nodded lightly before sweeping Yang Kai and Kong Si Ran with his divine sense and said in an indifferent tone, "Since they've come here, arrange a place for them to wait with the others." "Yes," the Raging Fire Temple disciple acknowledged before guiding Yang Kai and Kong Si Ran to a certain spot to the side and saying, "You two, wait over there. When we need you, we'll notify you." "Wait a moment." Yang Kai hurriedly stopped him. "What?" The Raging Fire Temple disciple seemed rather impatient. Yang Kai smiled and leaned forward and quietly started stuffing a few source crystals into his sleeve while whispering, "Friend, I want to ask you about the current situation. If it's convenient, can you explain a bit to me?" The Raging Fire Temple disciple felt the number of source crystals being stuffed into his sleeve and smiled with satisfaction. "What else could this be? To be honest, even I have no idea what's going inside Yuan Furnace Mountain. All I know is that the cave mansion of some fallen master has appeared. If it weren't for this phenomenon, I'm afraid no one would have noticed it. After these strange eruptions began, our two temple masters rushed over along with many elite disciples from the temple to explore this cave mansion. A fallen master's cave mansion? Xianxia pretended to be extremely surprised, his eyes widening as he asked, "Since you've discovered such a cave mansion, why hasn't your raging fire temple tried to explore it alone? Why are they not only allowing outside cultivators to come, but are even welcoming us to stay?" Upon hearing this, the raging fire temple disciple looked left and right before whispering quietly, "If we could explore it alone, why would we allow others to interfere? The two temple masters have already tried, but they couldn't break open the cave mansion's protective barriers with just their own strength. The barrier of the cave mansion seems to have been arranged by an Emperor Realm Master and still remains very strong despite years of neglect. Even with all of our raging fire temple's elites working together, we cannot break that barrier, so we can only depend on external forces." After hearing this, Xianxia showed a look of understanding and nodded. "So that's how it is." To the side, Xianxia furrowed his brow. Obviously, he was also surprised by this development. After all, he had come to quietly explore this cave mansion many years prior and, although he felt that the barrier was strong, it should have still been manageable for a Dao Source Realm Master. But he also knew that now was not the time to ask questions. "From what you say, it seems that your noble temple intends to break open the barrier with the help of outsiders like us?" Pondering, Xianxia asked. "Indeed, there is strength in numbers." Xianxia grinned meaningfully. "Obtaining help from outsiders is one thing, but how will the treasures inside be distributed if we manage to break the barrier?" The raging fire temple disciple shook his head and said, "I have no idea about that. That's something for the temple masters to worry about. That's all I know. Friends, please remain here." Having said this, the disciple left without giving Xianxia a chance to ask anything more. After he left, Xianxia finally glanced at Xianxia, and the two tacitly made their way to a more remote spot before both their expressions grew ugly. Who would have thought that things would turn out like this? Xianxia tightly frowned. "If I knew this would have happened, I would have proposed coming sooner to investigate. Now that this phenomenon is so visible, I'm afraid that everyone in the vicinity will come rushing over. It wouldn't matter if we came earlier or later, since even two Dao Source Realm Masters couldn't break in. I'm afraid that just the two of us would have been helpless. This situation might be disadvantageous, but that doesn't mean we don't have an edge." "Brother Yang, why do you say this?" Xianxia looked at him curiously. Xianxia grinned and said, "Shopkeeper Kong has something that no one else has. This is our advantage." After hearing this, Xianxia pondered for a moment before nodding and agreeing, "Good. What I have is still quite valuable." What they were referring to was naturally the map of the cave mansion. In the past, what the descendant of Gongsun Mu's servant gave Xianxia was not just the specific location of the cave mansion but also a map of its interior. With this thing in hand, no matter how many people went in, Xianxia and Xianxia weren't afraid of losing the initiative. Furthermore, according to the information Xianxia got after inquiring, Raging Fire Temple only knew that there was a cave mansion inside Yuan Furnace Mountain. As for whose cave mansion it was or what was inside it, they had no idea. In light of this, Xianxia finally calmed down, exchanging a knowing glance with Xianxia before both of them closed their eyes and sat down cross-legged, entering a calm, meditative state. Over time, more and more cultivators were attracted to Yuan Furnace Mountain by the strange phenomenon. However, the strengths of these cultivators were mixed, with many of them being just Origin returning realm and a dozen or so Origin kings mixed in. With the addition of the cultivators that had gathered before, the number of people at the base of Yuan Furnace Mountain had already crossed 70. After 2 days, the two Dao Source Realm Masters of Raging Fire Temple looked at each other before Zhong Qing gently nodded and said, "I think that we have the right amount of people. Let's start." Lian Yuming also nodded in agreement and said, "An undue delay might bring about trouble." Just as he said this, the two stood up at the same time. As soon as the two of them made a move, the cultivators gathered here opened their eyes and looked towards them one after another. Zhongqing looked at everyone before speaking. Friends who have been attracted here by this strange incident, I thank you for remaining patient for so long. This one is Raging Fire Temple's Vice Palace Master, Zhongqing. Many of you might recognize me. We have indeed heard of Vice Temple Master Zong. However, Vice Temple Master Zong, may I ask why have you gathered us here and what exactly is inside you on Furnace Mountain that is causing all this commotion? An impatient cultivator immediately inquired. Hearing this, Zhongqing slightly smiled and said, Friend has asked an excellent question. This Zong was just about to explain to everyone. As for what exactly is inside you on Furnace Mountain, truthfully, this Zong does not know. All that is known is that there is an abandoned cave mansion here. Furthermore, it seems to be a cave mansion of an Emperor Realm Master. An Emperor's cave mansion? There was actually something like that inside you on Furnace Mountain? This place is completely desolate. I've even passed by it many times in the past. Why didn't I think of exploring it before? Ah, what a loss. In an instant, everyone broke into a clamor, with some showing extreme frustration, while others were filled with excitement. Zhongqing continued with a smile. My Raging Fire Temple attempted to explore this cave mansion already and broke through the first 2 barriers protecting it. But we were unable to break the last barrier and were thus unable to enter. Because of this, we can only depend on all the friends gathered here now. As long as all of you are willing to cooperate with my Raging Fire Temple, the last barrier will surely be broken and everyone will be able to explore the cave mansion before us. So, the first barrier has already been broken. Xianxia muttered under his breath. He had been skeptical as to why Raging Fire Temple hadn't broken the barrier even with 2 Dao Source Realm Masters at its disposal. But now it seemed that there was more than one barrier to be broken, and the last one was particularly strong. Finally, everything made sense to him. Xianxia's previous information wasn't wrong, but because his strength was lacking, he simply didn't know about the additional barriers protecting the cave mansion. If it weren't for the appearance of this strange phenomenon, with just his and Yang Kai's strength, they might have been able to break the first 2 barriers, but would have been stopped by the third. In light of these facts, Xianxia finally found a little comfort. Everyone must be wondering what is stored inside this Emperor Realm Master's cave mansion, and judging by this phenomenon, this Zong can guarantee that there is definitely an extraordinary treasure inside, most likely some kind of extremely precious herb that is about to mature. The phenomenon, a 5-colored brilliance that was accompanied by an attractive, refreshing fragrance, was quite obviously not something an artifact would produce. Only when a rare and miraculous spirit grass or medicine was about to mature would such a phenomenon occur. Temple Master Zong, I would like to know, if the barrier does break, how will the things inside be distributed? This is your Raging Fire Temple's territory, so if you wish to monopolize everything inside this cave mansion, we will not be able to fight back. Suddenly, a sharp voice rose from the crowd, drifting from place to place, making it hard to figure out just who had spoken. Once this topic was brought to light, everyone immediately calmed down as well and turned their gazes towards Zhongqing. Obviously, everyone was very concerned about this. Zhongqing, on the other hand, wasn't the slightest bit angered by this question and just smiled as he announced, This Zong can understand your worries. But this Zong can also guarantee that if friends cooperate here to break this barrier, any treasure inside will belong to the one who finds it. This Zong and brother Lien would absolutely not attack you. Lien Yuming, who was standing beside him and had been silent all the while, nodded at this moment. Vice Temple Master Zong, words alone are no proof. How are we supposed to believe you? Even if Vice Temple Master Lien and you really attacked us, could we still resist? The sharp voice rose again. Zhongqing lightly smiled as he swept his gaze across the crowd, soon locking onto a thin man trying to look inconspicuous, and declared, If friend is unwilling to believe brother Lien and this Zong, you can always leave. We are not forcing you to remain. In the crowd, the face of the thin man, who was being stared at by Zhongqing, turned ugly. However, despite his whereabouts being exposed, he stood his ground and simply cupped his fists. Vice Temple Master Zong, please forgive me. It was just a slip of the tongue. Since the 2 temple masters have given their word, naturally I will believe you. In this situation, There really was no other choice. Zhongqing had already explained everything and given his word, and there was no way for the rest of the crowd to force him to swear an oath. Not that they would believe that either, even if he did. More importantly, if they wanted to enter the cave mansion, they only had one choice, so agreeing to Zhongqing's terms was inevitable. The thin man had promptly judged the situation and hurriedly compromised. Upon hearing him say so, Zhongqing smiled with satisfaction and nodded. If any friend here has any doubts about this arrangement, speak now. This Zong will address your concerns one by one. Everyone remained silent. Zhongqing nodded with satisfaction. Good. It seems that everyone is ready to proceed. In that case, we should not delay. Before we move out, though, let me forewarn you. If anyone dares to hide their strength while trying to fish in troubled waters, when we break this barrier, don't blame this Zong for being ruthless. Everyone didn't even dare to breathe loudly. At this time, Lian Yuming, who had been standing next to Zhongqing all the while, spoke. Now this old master will explain to you the characteristics of the barrier, so we can properly cooperate. Be sure to listen carefully. This cave mansion was definitely left behind by an Emperor Realm Master. The barriers outside it are divided into 3 layers. The first and second barriers aren't difficult to break, and my Raging Fire Temple is already quite familiar with the process. The real difficulty is the third barrier, which requires a great deal of strength to break. If the amount of strength used is insufficient, it will not break, and if it remains unbroken for long enough, it and the other 2 barriers will quickly repair themselves. My Raging Fire Temple has been stuck at this third barrier for some time now. In the following action, my Raging Fire Temple's disciples will break the repaired first and second barriers, while our external friends, Brother Zong, and I will jointly break the third. Does anyone have any objections? We naturally don't have any objection. However, Vice Temple Master Lien, what method will we be using to break the barrier? Is it enough for everyone to just attack it? Someone among the crowd asked, raising the issue everyone cared about. Lian Yuming nodded his acknowledgement when he heard this and said, the barrier has a reflective property, so attacking it will only result in backlash. As such, scattered attacks will not work. Instead, we will be using a special artifact in this old master's possession. Saying so, he summoned a dagger roughly 2 fingers long into his palm. The dagger was jet black and its edge had a strange gleam to it. Just from one glance, it was quite apparent that it was a high-quality artifact. A Dao source-grade artifact? Someone cried out in shock as looks of admiration appeared on the faces of the crowd. All the cultivators here were basically in the Origin Returning Realm or Origin King Realm, and most had never even seen a Dao source-grade artifact before, so when they saw this dagger, they were naturally surprised. Good. This old master's dagger isn't just an ordinary Dao source-grade artifact, but a mid-rank one that possesses a special ability. The greater the amount of energy infused into it, the more damage it can do. Even when this old master pours his full strength into this dagger, he is unable to bring out its full strength. Later, after Brother Zong and I, and everyone else will pour their chi into this dagger. Once this dagger is saturated, leave the rest to this old master. Lian Yuming said with a complacent yet smug look on his face, as if he was very satisfied with his artifact. Vice Temple Master Lian has such a peculiar artifact. With it, it won't be a problem to break the barrier then. A cultivator in the crowd cheered. If there is a problem, it will be because individuals in the crowd held back their strength. Lian Yuming put away the dagger with a flip of his wrist before shouting loudly. If there are no other questions, we will take a quarter-hour break before executing the plan. After saying this, he closed his eyes to adjust his breathing. Seeing this, everyone hurriedly sat down cross-legged to restore themselves to their peak state. Zhongqing, on the other hand, didn't close his eyes and instead began issuing instructions to the Raging Fire Temple disciples, making no attempt to hide his voice. Seeing Zhongqing tell the Raging Fire Temple disciples the timing to break the barrier, everyone also felt reassured. Brother Yang, you must be careful later. I feel that something is off. Raging Fire Temple is never this hospitable. Kong Si Ran suddenly sent a voice transmission straight into Yang Kai's ears. Yang Kai nodded without showing any visible change in his expression. None of the cultivators present were fools, so naturally many had concerns and doubts in this regard. However, at present, no one would risk offending Raging Fire Temple by bringing these issues up. All everyone could do was secretly put their guards up and act according to the situation. After 15 minutes, Lian Yuming and Zhong Qing gathered again as the former suddenly shouted, "It's time! Follow this old master." Saying so, he flew up. Others hurriedly followed after him seeing this. Soon after, everyone arrived halfway up Yuan Furnace Mountain and hovered above a stone platform. This platform was in no way small and could easily accommodate several dozen people, and on the cliffside on this plateau, there was a flat stone wall. After arriving here, Lian Yuming and Zhong Qing had everyone else stop while they flew over to the stone wall and began inspecting it carefully. "Is that the entrance?" Yang Kai secretly asked Kong Si Ran. Kong Si Ran nodded without making it obvious or speaking a word. After a while, the two vice-temple masters of Raging Fire Temple flew over and stood before everyone again where Zhong Qing spoke. "Everyone, Brother Lian and this Zhong have just checked and confirmed that the barrier has already been repaired. Please act according to how we just discussed. If we can really break this barrier in one fell swoop, we will gain access to this Emperor Realm Master's cave mansion where his Emperor-grade secret arts, pills, artifacts, and more lie waiting. All our efforts will not be in vain." Many people appeared to be tempted by his words, their blood beginning to boil. Zhong Qing's face suddenly turned serious as he shouted, "Raging Fire Temple disciples, move out!" As he issued the order, the dozens of elite Raging Fire Temple disciples split into two groups and began to assume two formations centered around the strongest cultivators in each while forming a series of hand seals. Yang Kai caught sight of Zhong Zijin's figure among these people as he was one of the center figures. With the circulation of Raging Fire Temple disciples' qi, a surprising scene appeared before everyone. The energy of these people seemed to become linked together, and it became increasingly difficult to distinguish one aura from another. As for the auras of the two Raging Fire Temple disciples at the center of each group, they both shot up from the Third Order Origin King Realm to the Dao Source Realm. Obviously, this was a secret technique Raging Fire Temple possessed to link together a group of individuals to dramatically boost the strength of a single person temporarily. After a while, the leader of one of the groups let out a shout before a sharp sword suddenly appeared in his hand, and he started pouring his energy into it. Moments later, he directly thrust this sword forward. The sword struck the first barrier, which started shining brightly, blocking the thrust. However, as the man continued pressing forward, the barrier was quickly split apart. Immediately after, the second Raging Fire Temple group with Zhong Zijin at its center followed up. After having received everyone's qi, a bright flash appeared in Zhong Zijin's hand, and he used some unknown artifact to shoot out a brilliant ball of light. That ball of light passed through the broken first barrier and soon struck the second. Judging from the intensity of the light on impact, the second barrier was much denser than the first, but it still couldn't stop the Raging Fire Temple's cultivators. Not long after, the second barrier was also broken. At this moment, the awaiting Lian Yuming shouted, "Begin!" Just as his voice fell, he summoned his dagger artifact and began weaving a complex series of seals at an astonishing speed. Zhong Qing, who was beside him, instantly started pouring his own energy into the dagger without a moment of hesitation. The next moment, the several dozen foreign cultivators also used their own techniques to pour their qi into the dagger. The dagger started humming as more and more qi was poured into it, and surprisingly, it also began to change shape, going from only 2 fingers in length to nearly a meter, from pitch black to multicolored. Lian Yuming's arms started fiercely shaking as a strained look appeared on his face, like he was struggling to control this immense energy. He only persisted for less than 10 breaths, though, before he shouted with no other alternative, "Go!" As he pointed his hand, the meter-long danger whistled through the air, passing through the first and second barriers before striking something solid. Honk! The dagger shook slightly, and Lian Yuming's figure trembled along with all the other cultivators who had poured their energy into it. All of them seemed to have felt a powerful recoil at this moment, causing many people's expressions to slightly change. In front of the dagger, an even thicker barrier than the first two flickered, holding the dagger back. making it unable to advance at all. Lian Yuming's face couldn't help turning ugly at this sight as he constantly formed more seals. But in the end, he was still unable to break the third barrier. It was a deadlock. What made the situation even worse was when Zhong Zijin suddenly shouted, "Father, the second barrier has begun to repair itself." As he spoke, the second barrier that he was responsible for breaking was flashing with white light as it began to fill in its various cracks at an extremely fast rate. Zhong Zijin and the other Raging Fire Temple disciples were forced to push in even more energy just to maintain the status quo. Zhong Qing's face immediately darkened at this sight, and he promptly shouted, "Everyone, our success or failure depends on this moment. If we cannot break the third barrier now, we will never be able to enter this cave mansion. Are you still going to keep holding back even now? Do none of you want to see what wondrous treasures there are hiding here?" As soon as Zhong Qing said this, everyone's face turned grim, but more than that, some people looked embarrassed. Obviously, as Zhong Qing had said, not all cultivators were using their full strength when cooperating with the two Dao source realms. They were all hoping for others to make the effort while they sat back and enjoyed the fruit of others' labor. If the third barrier was broken in one fell swoop, it was safe to assume that no one would blame them. But now that the breaking of the third barrier had reached a stalemate, some people were left in an embarrassing situation. Zhong Qing said again, "This Zhong has no idea what's going on in your mind, but this Zhong wants to see what kind of treasures are inside." Just as his voice fell, his body erupted with energy as he poured his energy even more fiercely into the dagger. Someone in the crowd couldn't help but shout, "Since even Vice Temple Master Zhong is being so sincere, how can we hide anymore? If we don't do it now, when will we?" While speaking, he no longer hid anymore and poured every bit of his Saint Qi into the dagger. The rest of the people glanced at each other with a determined look in their eyes. They too started to rouse their energy. In a short time, the already huge dagger had grown a lot bigger. Obviously, it had received a lot more energy. After such an increase, Lian Yuming faintly felt that he couldn't bear it anymore. His expression couldn't help but change. He exclaimed aloud, "Great! With your help, this old master will risk everything to break this barrier." He opened his mouth and spewed a mouthful of blood essence that turned into mist and enveloped the dagger. Very soon, the mist of blood was completely absorbed by the dagger as a glowing layer of crimson appeared along with its colorful sheen. At first, the dagger seemed uncontrollable, but it actually settled down again. Lian Yuming let out a furious cry as the dagger and the third barrier clashed with each other with an earth-shattering sound, causing even the world energy to become chaotic. Crack. Finally, a soft sound which everyone was waiting for was heard. Everyone couldn't help but smile happily, because an opening had finally appeared on that rock-hard third barrier. Lian Yuming changed the seals again as he urged his mid-rank Dao source-grade artifact to fiercely slash forward. The third barrier instantly shattered to pieces with a clattering noise. It broke like a mirror. Much to everyone's surprise, it broke just like that. The instant the third barrier broke, the first and second barrier burst like a bubble and disappeared all of a sudden. "We did it!" someone cried in joy. But many more people were already in motion, ready to rush ahead. But right then, Lian Yuming and Zhong Qing suddenly withdrew 30 or so meters. At the same time, the Raging Fire Temple disciples followed suit, backing away together. Upon seeing this, Yang Kai couldn't help but chuckle. Without a warning, he grabbed Kong Si Ran, who was about to rush forward, and flew back several dozen feet. The next moment, swishing sounds were heard as something suddenly shot out. Suddenly, dazzling beams of light shot out from the wall of stone in the front, raining down on the crowd. "What's this? Damn it, quickly hide!" Screams and shouts quickly resounded on the mountain. When those unsuspecting cultivators noticed that something was wrong, they evaded left and right, again and again. But the beams shooting out of the wall of stone were simply too fast. Before they could mount any kind of reaction, the beams were already upon them. The next moment, miserable cries rang, one after another. The cultivators in the sky fell down like dumplings, bleeding buckets, and the stronger ones even burst into mists of blood. Not even their bones were left. Most of the several dozen cultivators fell in an instant, and none of the Origin returning Realm Masters had survived. Even the surviving Origin King Realm Masters were injured. Some of the seriously injured ones were missing their arms and legs. It was a ghastly sight. Far away, Yang Kai's face turned ashen. Kong Si Ran's face was even paler. Fear could be clearly seen on his face. Had Yang Kai not noticed everything quickly and pulled him back, he might have been seriously injured if not dead already. As I thought, after the barrier broke, there were other traps. Zhong Qing's words suddenly echoed from one side. Lien Yuming gently nodded his agreement. Fortunately, we were ready for it, otherwise. While speaking, he turned his head and looked around. All the surviving cultivators were filled with righteous indignation when they noticed his gaze. Their faces distorted with anger. But no one dared to say anything. They all knew it would be useless to say anything now. Even though the Raging Fire Temple was unkind to them, why would people not try to outwit the other? Why would they not scheme against each other? How could they blame others when they themselves hadn't taken preventive measures? They could only blame themselves for not able to see it miles away. What's more, no one among the Raging Fire Temple had been injured. More importantly, they still had the two Dao Source Realm Masters, who hadn't taken the initiative to attack them. But if they point fingers at them now, they might really kill them. No one would do such a stupid thing. Ha! Zhong Qing suddenly let out a soft exclamation as he turned his head and glanced at Yang Kai and Kong Si Ran, who were standing several dozen feet away. He seemed surprised that the two were safe and sound. However, he didn't care about it too much. Instead, he said to the Raging Fire Temple disciples, "The barrier is broken. Let's go in." While speaking, he took the lead and rushed towards the entrance that had appeared on the stone wall. The rest of the Raging Fire Temple disciples closely followed after him. After a short while, all the people of the Raging Fire Temple had left. Only now did everyone let their tongues loose. All kinds of curses and swears rang everywhere. However, these cultivators could only satisfy themselves like this. Having suffered serious injuries, no one had any courage left to explore the cave mansion. Not to mention, no one could say whether there were even more horrifying barriers inside. And then there were also those shameless guys of the Raging Fire Temple. They weren't that easy to provoke. If they entered in their current shape, there was a 90% likelihood that they would die. As such, many people immediately flew away after cursing for a while, looking for a place to heal their injuries. Yang Kai and Kong Si Ran looked at each other, their faces growing incomparably ugly. Even though they already knew that the Raging Fire Temple people weren't that easy to reason with, who would have thought that they would murder with a borrowed knife and directly cull away their potential rivals? Among the foreign cultivators, only Yang Kai and Kong Si Ran were still in one piece. And if they went in and ran into the Raging Fire Temple team, they both had a pretty clear idea how things would end for them then. Just when the two were hesitating, the opening on the stone wall started rumbling. The two were shocked when they heard the rumble. They looked up and saw that the opening was closing at a subtle speed. "This opening won't last for a long time?" Yang Kai's expression changed. He quickly asked, "Brother Kan, are we going in or not?" Kong Si Ran's face changed. He was still hesitating. But when he saw that the hole was about to be completely closed, he grit his teeth and said, "Brother Yang, you should go back. I will go in alone." Obviously, he didn't want to drag Yang Kai with him. Having said this, he flew straight towards the stone wall. A moment later, his figure appeared inside the Yuan Furnace Mountain. When he looked back, the entrance was already closed. Kong Si Ran turned his head as if he sensed something. The next moment, he saw a smiling Yang Kai looking at him. He didn't even realize that Yang Kai had come in with him. He couldn't help but say in surprise, "Brother Yang, you? There is plenty of time for whatever you want to say later. Let's solve the immediate problem first." Yang Kai chuckled as he turned and stared at the front. In front of them were two third-order Origin King Realm Raging Fire Temple disciples, coldly staring at them. They looked displeased and angry. The figure on the left was tall and, maybe because he cultivated fire attribute secret art, his skin and even his hair were red. The figure on the right was short and chubby with a big belly. He was staring at Yang Kai, and Kang Si ran with a smile on his face. His face was plump, and when he narrowed his small eyes, his eyeballs couldn't be seen. Kang Si ran couldn't help but furrow his brow at the sight of this. Naturally, they knew that these two raging fire temple disciples were left to guard the opening, preventing anyone from entering this place. Having thought all this, he cupped his fists and asked, "Friends, what's the meaning of this?" The tall cultivator on the left didn't answer, but the fat cultivator smiled and said, "Aren't you too clear what it means? Everyone is smart here, so I won't speak nonsense anymore. Now that the entrance is closed, it seems that no one else will come in. What do you two think? Should my fellow brother and I compete with you, or should we sit down and talk to kill time?" Kang Si Rant's expression changed. He rebuked in a low voice, "Your Excellency, you mean to say that you won't let us pass?" The obese cultivator cupped his fists and said, "It's two Vice Temple Master's order. This one doesn't dare to disobey it. Friends, please don't make it difficult for us. Anyway, we just worked together to break the barrier just now, didn't we? When all hares are killed, the hounds are stewed and eaten. The raging fire temple's means are really praiseworthy." Kang Si Rant's face turned livid in anger as he quickly asked, "And what if this Kong insists on passing through?" The obese cultivator's face turned ashen. He narrowed his small eyes as they flickered with cold gleam. His tone also grew colder. "If that's the case, then don't blame my fellow brother and me for being merciless." "Wait a minute." Right then, Yang Kai suddenly reached out and shouted. The obese cultivator immediately turned his gaze at Yang Kai. Originally, he believed that Yang Kai wanted to say something, but the next moment, he saw a beam shooting toward him like a bow fired from an arrow. The obese cultivator's expression changed. He took a deep breath as his already fat body suddenly grew fatter. His entire figure had doubled in size. He then opened his mouth and threw a ball of fire, which in turn transformed into a fire dragon and greeted the oncoming beam. While the two made their moves, Kang Si Ran and the tall man also reacted. Kang Si Ran didn't say anything and suddenly summoned a club-shaped artifact. After he poured his source chi into it, the club-shaped artifact immediately shot straight toward the tall and robust man, leaving a purple trail. The tall man was taken aback by this sight, but he didn't panic. A long saber appeared in his hand with a flick of wrist before he shouted, "The saber rules the Jianghu." He swung the saber diagonally. It started to radiate scorching hot energy before a peerless beam shot out from the blade, greeting the oncoming artifact. Bam, boom, bam. The four third-order origin kings hurriedly acted in the narrow tunnel. The resulting force from their clash gave the impression that it would blow the entire mountain apart. The saber technique displayed by the red-haired raging fire temple disciple clashed with Kang Si Rant's artifact with a deafening clap, bursting forth with a dazzling flash. Immediately after, extremely terrifying fluctuations spread into the surrounding. At the same time, Yang Kai and the obese cultivators clashed as well. Yang Kai might have launched a sneak attack, but the obese cultivator wasn't any run-of-the-mill cultivator. Since he could participate in this operation and was even left behind by Zhongqing and Lian Yuming to guard the entrance, he was naturally an elite of the Raging Fire Temple whose combat skills were definitely higher. After the obese cultivator took a deep breath and his body became fatter, Yang Kai was almost left with no room to escape when he suddenly breathed the fire dragon. After a dazzling fiery red flash, Yang Kai's figure seemed to have been melted away as he slowly disappeared. The obese cultivator couldn't help furrowing his brow. He instinctively felt that Yang Kai shouldn't have been killed that easily. But as he looked around, he couldn't find Yang Kai at all. This gave him a bad feeling. Right then, a peculiar power suddenly appeared behind him. As soon as that power appeared, it enveloped him like a cage. In an instant, he felt that the space around him had suddenly become extremely murky. He felt as if he had fallen into a swamp. Furthermore, not only was this power affecting his mobility, but was also affecting the circulation of his energy. "Domain! How is this possible?" The obese cultivator cried in shock. He too was a third-order origin king-level cultivator. His own domain had reached the grand accomplishment stage. Naturally, when he was confronting Yang Kai, he had spread his around his entire body, guarding himself against surprises. But when the enemy's domain was cast, he suddenly felt his own domain completely suppressed. How can the enemy's domain be so strong when he is in the same third-order origin king realm? Compared with him, my domain is just simply a joke. Furthermore, in his domain there seems to be an extremely weird power, a power that can affect space. He was greatly shocked. He promptly bit the tip of his tongue and spewed a mouthful of blood essence. At the same time, he let out a crazed cry as he mobilized all the source chi in his body, trying to get free of the shackles and suppression of the domain. Suddenly, a cracking sound resounded in the narrow space. It was the sound of the obese cultivator's bones grinding against each other. These sounds were particularly harsh. Behind him, Yang Kai's eyes grew colder seeing this. A long sword suddenly appeared in his hand. As he then poured his source chi in it, it let out a clear hum. Yang Kai was surrounded by a sword aura which suddenly turned in a whirlwind as the tip of sword shone, cutting straight toward the obese cultivator's neck. Suddenly, before the glow from the sword could even reach him, an inexplicable force enveloped the obese cultivator. The obese cultivator couldn't help but tremble. His squinted small eyes suddenly bulged wide and round as if he had seen a ghost in broad daylight. There was a look of incredulity on his face. With a flash of light, Yang Kai reappeared before the fat cultivator, holding the sword in one hand. As he gently flicked the sword, a drop of blood trickled down the blade. The obese cultivator was rooted on the spot, staring at Yang Kai in a daze. His throat made a little noise as if he wanted to say something. However, in the end, he could only utter one word: principle. Just as he said this, the obese cultivator's body quickly deflated like a punctured balloon. At the same time, a bloody red line appeared on his neck as a fountain of blood spurted out like a fountain before his head flew into the air. The headless corpse of the obese cultivator fell back with a thump. You dare to kill my senior brother?" The red-haired cultivator couldn't help but cry in shock at the sight of this. Compared to the death of his senior brother, he couldn't believe the fact that Yang Kai killed him in such a short time. He was pretty clear about how strong his senior brother was. He was the elite of the elites of Raging Fire Temple. How could he be beheaded by a guy who was similarly a third-order origin king in 1 or 3 moves? As he shouted, he couldn't help but gasp in shock as a chill ran down his spine. Yang Kai raised his head and coldly said, "So what if I killed him? It's your turn next." "Ah?" The red-haired cultivator was startled and retreat in horror, again and again. Yang Kai fiercely shouted, "Brother Kong, don't show any mercy." Just as he said this, Yang Kai's figure was already shrouded in a sword aura as he cut toward the red-haired cultivator. At the sight of this, Kong Si Ran also grit his teeth and attacked the red-haired cultivator with that artifact at full strength. The red-haired cultivator might not be any weaker than the obese senior brother, but Yang Kai and Kong Si Ran weren't that easy to deal with. And under their joint attacks, the red-haired cultivator was at their mercy. He was powerless to fight back. And because of the terrain, the red-haired cultivator couldn't even escape. After half the time it takes to drink a cup of tea, the red-haired cultivator too fell back on the ground, bleeding. At this moment, Kong Si Ran saw Yang Kai in a new light. He sized him up and down with a gaze full of surprise. Shopkeeper Kong might have been acquainted with Yang Kai for quite some time, but it was the first he teamed up with Yang Kai in a real sense to fight against an enemy. Before today, Kong Si Ran had no idea that Yang Kai was so strong. "Brother Yang, is the sword in your hand a Dao source-grade artifact?" Kong Si Ran thoughtfully gazed at the weapon in Yang Kai's hand. Yang Kai pursed his lips into a smile and said, nodding, "That's right. This long sword was exactly the one used by Han Leng before. After Han Leng's death, it became Yang Kai's trophy. Although Yang Kai himself hadn't reached the Dao source realm, he had absorbed and refined many shattered principle fragments in the 5-colored treasure pagoda. So he could make slight use of the power of some principles. And coupled with this long sword and the space secret technique, it was naturally a piece of cake to kill cultivators of the same realm. Brother Yang can actually use the principles. It seems you are not far away from advancing to the next level. This Kong is envious. Kong Si Ran sighed, again and again. He was much older than Yang Kai. He had reached the third-order origin king realm far earlier than Yang Kai, yet he had not touched the threshold of principles. He had been stuck before the Tao source realm. So, when he compared himself with Yang Kai, he was in admiration as well as frustration. Brother Kong, don't be anxious. As long as you find the Tao source pill here, you won't need to worry about it. Yang Kai casually comforted. Kong Si Ran's eyes immediately lit up. He nodded and agreed. You are right. Afterwards, the two picked up the space rings of the dead raging fire temple cultivators, each of them taking one, before they continued venturing deeper. What was Gong Sun Mu's cave mansion like? Yang Kai and Kong Si Ran didn't have time to investigate. After all, the obese cultivator and the red-haired cultivator had stopped them as soon as they came in. At this moment, they finally got to check it out. There was a narrow corridor in front of them. The walls of the corridor were dotted with some strange rocks that were emitting light. So, the corridor wasn't dim at all. As the two were investigating carefully, they moved forward slowly. They didn't encounter any danger, nor did they run into anyone from the Raging Fire Temple. They found tracks of Raging Fire Temple cultivators along the way, but they were nowhere to be found. Heaven knows where they had gone. After about the time it takes an incense to burn, the two suddenly walked into a spacious stone room. They immediately looked left and right just after stepping inside. But the next moment, Yang Kai couldn't help but look shocked, because they had run into a dead end. The situation inside the stone room was also quite clear at a glance. Apart from many stone furnaces carved from rocks, there was nothing else here. There were a lot of stone furnaces, roughly about 30 at least. What Yang Kai found weirder was that the Raging Fire Temple disciples weren't here either. Brother Yang, what's going on? Kong Si Ran looked astonished. Yang Kai shook his head as he carefully probed the stone room with his divine sense, but didn't find any signs of danger. He then said, We didn't find a fork in the road. The Raging Fire Temple disciples should be here, but they aren't. Is there a transmission array here? Kong Si Ran found it reasonable as well. He then suggested, Why don't we look around? Yang Kai nodded in agreement and said, Brother Kong, I will check this stone room, while you check the map to see if you can find a way out. Okay, Kong Si Ran replied. He then took out an old beast skin and started studying it, furrowing his brow. Yang Kai then started carefully investigating every nook and cranny of the stone room. The stone room wasn't that big. After a while, he returned to the point where he started. He then scanned the stone furnaces back and forth. If there was anything suspicious in this stone room, that was these stone furnaces. However, he had also used his divine sense to carefully check them out just now. There was nothing strange about these stone furnaces, and they weren't made from some artifact refining material. It was just ordinary stone. He then turned his head and glanced at Kong Si Ran. Seeing that he was still checking the beast skin parchment and still hadn't found any clues, Yang Kai didn't bother him. He just walked to a stone furnace and touched it. The moment Yang Kai's hand came in contact with the stone furnace, he heard a strange clicking sound before a hole suddenly appeared where Yang Kai was standing. His body immediately started sinking. He was on the verge of falling down. Yang Kai was slightly taken aback, but he didn't panic. He immediately circulated his source chi, wanting to rise into the air. But the next thing that happened gave Yang Kai a shock. Just when he was circulating his energy, a powerful suction came from underneath his feet. Before he could rise up, he was sucked into a black hole on the ground. The next moment, Yang Kai's expression changed for the worse. He only had the time to let out a cry before his entire figure fell straight down. And the black hole that had just opened up closed itself right after, plunging him into the darkness. Brother Yang! The nearby Kong Si Ran was greatly shocked upon hearing the commotion. He hurriedly stood up and rushed toward Yang Kai. But he was too late. When he arrived at Yang Kai's previous position, Yang Kai had long disappeared. Staring at the place where Yang Kai disappeared, Kong Si Ran's expression changed several times. Finally, He grit his teeth and reached out to touch the stone furnace Xianxia had just touched. But nothing happened. The ground didn't crack open as he had expected. Kang Si Ran tried several times before he decided that continuing anymore would be fruitless. As a last resort, he could only turn to one of the other stone furnaces. He started testing them one by one. Only when he touched the seventh furnace did the ground underneath his feet crack open, causing him to plummet like Xianxia. It was dark all around. Xianxia felt his body free-falling constantly as if there was no end to this. When he looked up, he couldn't find even a ray of light. Xianxia furrowed his brow slightly. He might have been a little taken aback by the situation he was in, but he wasn't that alarmed. What happened before in the stone room allowed him to understand one thing. All those stone furnaces should be the triggers that activate on touch. That was why he couldn't find any clues when he used his divine sense. Only when he touched the stone furnace was the trap in the stone room finally triggered. In light of this, the raging fire temple disciples should have fallen into this trap. That was the reason why the stone room above was empty. I wonder if Kang Si Ran would also follow me down. And would there be raging fire temple cultivators below? He didn't dare to be careless. He was silently circulating his source chi, ready to attack at a moment's notice if he found something wrong. Not long after, he saw a ray of light coming from below. Xianxia hurriedly spread his divine sense to scan, and a strange look appeared on his face in the next moment, because there was another stone room below. However, it was a little different from his imagination. There weren't any raging fire temple cultivators in the stone room. Two was empty. After a while, Xianxia fell into the stone room and he promptly looked around. The stone room was completely empty. There was even a stone furnace this time. Before Xianxia could take a closer look, an unusual energy fluctuation suddenly appeared. Soon, a stone platform-like thing appeared out of nowhere in the center of the room. The stone platform slowly rose, causing lots of rumbles. While watching, Xianxia kept his guard up all the while. The stone platform finally stabilized, but up till now, Xianxia still didn't notice any danger. He furrowed his brow, slowly making his way toward the stone platform. He came before the stone platform and went up the stairs, soon reaching the top of the stone platform. An array? Xianxia raised his brow. He looked at the mysterious pattern that had appeared on the flat surface of the stone platform, surprised. He could faintly sense a sliver of space force fluctuations originating from this pattern. A transmission array? Xianxia was greatly taken by surprise. But in light of this, he was now sure that if this array on the stone platform activated, it should teleport him to another place. However, this transmission array was very different from what he had learned. So Xianxia didn't dare to rush. He paid even closer attention to it, trying to see some clues from it. As he looked carefully, Xianxia found a line of small text under the array, covered by the dust. He cautiously reached out and brushed away the dust as the line of small text immediately emerged before his eyes. The array can be activated by pouring fire attribute energy into the array. Xianxia read, muttering to himself. He couldn't help but frown. Clearly, this is a transmission array, but why does it need fire attribute energy? Xianxia was a little confused. And what's the point of having such a special array in this stone room? Xianxia couldn't figure it out after thinking over it for a while. So he stopped thinking about it. He had a fire attribute type of energy. Whether it was the conflagration knowledge C or fire sword chi, they were both categorized as fire attribute energy. However, he didn't rush to activate the array and rather just stood there, waiting patiently. He was waiting for Kang Si Ran, waiting for him to come down before moving together. But to Xianxia's disappointment, even after waiting for half an hour, Kang Si Ran was nowhere to be seen. When I triggered the stone furnace's trap, Kang Si Ran must have seen me fall. And judging by his personality, he would not ignore me for sure. Xianxia was sure that Kang Si Ran would certainly trigger the stone furnace mechanism. However, Kang Si Ran was nowhere to be found. There was only one explanation to this. Kang Si Ran must have fallen into another stone room. There should be more than one stone room here. Otherwise, when I fell down, I should have seen at least one of the raging fire temple disciples. Maybe everyone who fell was separated so that they couldn't work together. Of course, this was only Yang Kai's conjecture based on the situation he was in. He couldn't verify if it was true. Since he couldn't wait for Kang Si Ran, Yang Kai was left with no choice but to act alone. Considering all this, he no longer hesitated. He stretched his hand out toward the array and mobilized the fire attribute energy in his body, infusing it into the array. A scorching hot aura immediately appeared in the stone room, causing the entire room to momentarily tremble. Suddenly, the array lines on the stone platform lit up. Seeing this, Yang Kai knew that there was no mistake. This array indeed required fire attribute energy to start up. Then, he started pushing the fire attribute energy in his body even more madly. Bam, boom, bam. A series of rumbles resounded as the array on the stone platform flickered with dazzling flashes, enveloping Yang Kai. And when the light dissipated, Yang Kai had disappeared. This? Yang Kai turned his head and looked around. He found that where he was now was no different from the stone room he was before. Had he not felt that he had just teleported, Yang Kai would have thought that he had never moved. What the hell is this place? Yang Kai started frowning. He felt so confused. In a normal cave mansion of a predecessor, there were many defensive and restriction-type spirit arrays. This was the norm, and there was no cultivator who didn't arrange things like this in his or her cave mansion. However, the cave mansion before him was a little strange. Many stone rooms were exactly the same. The first stone room he just came through only required the infusion of the array with fire attribute energy to safely pass. There wasn't any difficulty or danger whatsoever. I wonder what's special about this stone room. Just as he was puzzling over, familiar rumbles rang again. The next moment, Yang Kai noticed that another stone platform just like the previous one had appeared in the center of the stone room. He furrowed his brow. But all he could do was slowly ascend the stone platform with the mentality of taking things as they come. Looking around, Yang Kai couldn't help but let out a soft cry in surprise, because there wasn't any array on the stone platform this time around. Instead, many grooves had appeared. There were different kinds of herbs in these grooves. These herbs had been stored with a special technique, preserving them for thousands of years without decaying. More importantly, their medicinal properties were still intact. They appeared as if they had just been picked up. Yang Kai took a look and found that most of these herbs were foreign. He could only recognize 3 out of 10. He couldn't recognize the rest. Afterwards, he shifted his attention to the bottom part of the stone platform. And as expected, there he saw another line of small text. After dusting off the dust, Yang Kai read aloud, staring at the line of small text. Select 15 poisonous herbs and the spirit array can be activated. Select 15? Yang Kai was greatly shocked. He carefully counted all the herbs on the stone platform. He found that all the herbs added to be only 25, that's all. In other words, more than half of these herbs were poisonous. What does the owner of this cave mansion want? Why did he give such a difficult problem? Yang Kai was left completely confused. He shook his head. All he could do was immerse himself deep into his mind and intently look at the 25 herbs in front of him. Although the text on the stone platform didn't explain the consequences of choosing the wrong one, Yang Kai knew better not to test it out. Whether this cave mansion was left by Gong Sun Mu or not, it certainly belonged to an Emperor Realm Master. Yang Kai couldn't speculate the means of an Emperor Realm Master. Once he made the wrong choice, he might fall here. He didn't dare to play with his life. Thus, he became extremely serious. This heavenly heart orchid is poisonous. And so is this filthy shade grass. Yang Kai, after looking at them for a while, he first took the herbs he recognized from the groove and set them aside. He was very cautious throughout the process, but since he didn't trigger any restriction, it seemed that he had chosen the right one. However, he didn't recognize the rest of the herbs. On the one hand, it was because of his superficial knowledge of the Star Boundaries products, and on the other, it was also related to how foreign these herbs were to him. Even the native alchemists of the Star Boundary would not dare to say that they knew all these herbs, if they were here. However, as an alchemist, Yang Kai had studied the nature of herbs. The alchemical properties of every herb had their own rules and characteristics. So, even if he didn't recognize most of the herbs, it didn't prevent him from judging whether these herbs were toxic or not. He leaned closer to the herbs and carefully sniffed them. Very soon, Xianxia had selected several more poisonous herbs from them. The toxicity of these herbs was very subtle. Most people couldn't judge by their smell. Only an alchemist, someone who dealt with herbs all the time, or people who had studied herbs, could judge them. After tossing around a bit more, Xianxia chose 8 more. However, there were still more than half of the 15 herbs left to choose from. Unfortunately, the toxicity of the rest of the herbs couldn't be judged by their smell. Xianxia thought for a while before he came to the conclusion that he could only taste them himself and judge them by the reaction from his tongue and body. He hesitated no longer after having come to this conclusion. He reached out and tore a very small piece from the petal of a light blue flower. He then put it in his mouth and started chewing. The next moment, Xianxia's expression changed as he suddenly turned pale. While chewing the small piece of petal, an extremely cold sensation suddenly numbed his mouth. It almost froze his tongue. A panicked Xianxia hurriedly circulated his source qi and immediately dispelled it. Although it's very strong, this one is not poisonous. After a while, Xianxia looked at the light blue flower with a look of fear. He had no idea what kind of herb would contain this kind of terrifying coldness. Since he had made the confirmation, he could only cast his gaze on another herb. Following suit, he tore a small piece and stuffed it into his mouth. The next moment, Xianxia sat cross-legged as his face turned black and blue alternatively. His facial features were extremely distorted, as if he was suffering extremely cruel torture. After the time it takes for an entire incense to burn, he opened his mouth and spurted a stream of black blood. His aura had also fallen a lot. What a fearsome poison! Xianxia's face was filled with lingering fear. He had just chewed just a very tiny piece of it, and yet he was poisoned. If he had taken the entire herb, he would have surely died at once. Even though the herbs inside the grooves of the stone platform tasted horrendous, and their toxicity was so terrifying that they even made Xianxia's tongue numb, if he wanted to leave this forsaken place, he could only complete the requirements as described in the small text on the stone platform. Xianxia could only grit his teeth and continue to taste-test the unfamiliar herbs. It took him almost half a day to taste-test all the herbs he couldn't recognize and be sure whether they were poisonous or not. He went through all kinds of pain and torture, and had it not been for Xianxia's sturdy physique and strong recovery, he might have lost his life. Even so, he failed to pick the 15 herbs. How come there are only 13? Xianxia tightly frowned standing before the stone platform. He looked rather confused. Since the owner of this cave mansion left such a test for intruders to solve, he would surely not deliberately play tricks. In other words, 15 of these 25 herbs were indeed poisonous. But Xianxia had used all 3 methods, looked, smelled, and tasted, but he could only ascertain that 13 herbs were poisonous. He couldn't find the remaining 2. What's wrong here? His eyes swept across the grooves of the stone platform, one by one, but he couldn't find the remaining 2 from them. Just as Xianxia was at a loss before the stone platform, all the cultivators who had entered this cave mansion were facing the same dilemma. From the get-go, all the Raging Fire Temple cultivators cultivated fire attribute secret art. So, the first stone room wasn't that difficult for them at all. Just like Xianxia, they infused their fire attribute energy into the stone platform and were transmitted to the second stone room immediately after. Even Kong Siran had easily passed the first stone room's test. But now, everyone was stumped by the second stone room's test. In a certain stone room, a Raging Fire Temple disciple looked at the 25 herbs and scratched his head. He wasn't an alchemist. He didn't even know what these herbs were, let alone how to distinguish between the toxic and non-toxic ones. He waited and watched for a long time before selecting a few certain toxic herbs from among them. However, he couldn't distinguish anymore. Seeing the time slipping by, the Raging Fire Temple disciple grit his teeth and took out a herb from the groove. And the moment he took out this herb, the entire stone room suddenly hummed before the stone platform in front of him sank at an extremely fast speed. It disappeared in the blink of an eye. The cultivator was struck with panic. He hurriedly flew back and circulated his source chi, preparing for the unexpected. Suddenly, weng weng noises rang from the stone room. The next moment, specks of light flashed in the room. The specks of light were dense and were just about everywhere. By a rough count, there were hundreds of them. At first glance, they looked like the eyes of fearsome monsters, giving the onlookers the chills. In the next moment, these flickering lights shook a little as they bombarded the cultivator together, giving off fearsome energy fluctuations all of a sudden. Seeing this, a look of despair immediately took over the raging fire temple cultivator's face. All he could do was let out a scream before he was drowned by the countless beams of light. After a moment, when the light finally dissipated, the raging fire temple disciple was nowhere to be found. All that remained was a pool of red blood and some tattered pieces of clothes where he had stood as proof of his existence. This was not the only raging fire temple disciple to suffer this kind of misfortune. All the cultivators who chose the wrong herbs had triggered the restriction in the room and were killed on the spot within a breath. Not even their bones were left. In another stone room, Kong Si ran solemnly, took out a herb from the groove in front of the stone platform. After waiting for a while, when he realized that he was still very much safe and sound, he couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief. He might not be an alchemist, but as the shopkeeper of the Spirit Pill Plaza and a native cultivator of the Star Boundary, his knowledge and experience of herbs was much better than that of Yang Kai. After all, he too could be considered as someone who dealt with the herbs every day. Therefore, although the test in the second stone room was a little difficult for him, it was not without hope. In another stone room, the Raging Fire Temple's Vice Temple Master, Lian Yuming, looked at the 25 herbs on the stone platform before him. He quickly selected about 10 herbs and started pondering. He then chose a few more, making the count 13. Furthermore, the herbs he had chosen were exactly the same as the herbs Yang Kai had chosen after so much painstaking effort. Only the final 2 remained. Lian Yuming's gaze alternated between the remaining herbs with lightning-fast speed as he searched his memories for the knowledge of herbs he had. After the time it takes for an incense to burn, a smile suddenly appeared on his face as he took out 2 kinds of herbs from the remaining herbs in the grooves. And when he took out the last 2 herbs, the place where he stood suddenly lit up as a transmission array slowly emerged, teleporting him to another place, and the stone platform in the stone room slowly sank at the same time. In the stone room, Yang Kai still had a worried look on his face. Once again, he carefully checked the remaining herbs, but he was still unable to determine which 2 were poisonous. Just as he was at a loss, he suddenly seemed to have been struck with a realization as his eyes shone with an intelligent gleam. Immediately, he hurriedly tore a piece of the remaining herbs, one after another, and carefully ground and mixed them in pairs. After a short while, when he was grinding 2 herbs with his hands and mixing their paste, a pungent and spicy smell suddenly permeated from his fingertips. This pungent smell immediately made him dizzy as a scorching hot feeling spread from his fingertips. Yang Kai immediately circulated the profound art and dispelled the discomforting feeling. His face immediately lit up with joy as he burst into laughter and spoke, "That's it! In this world, some herbs were non-toxic in nature, but when they were mixed with some special herbs, they might become highly toxic." This common sense wasn't just applicable in the alchemy world but also in the lives of ordinary people who hadn't even cultivated. Yang Kai hadn't thought of it at first, but now this situation had proved that his notion was correct. He decisively took out 2 reactive herbs from the groove and set them aside. A transmission array suddenly appeared underneath his feet, and his eyes were blinded by a dazzling flash of light before the feeling of being teleported struck him again. After he regained his footing, he turned his head and looked around. Suddenly, a weird look appeared on his face as he nodded and said, "As I had expected." He was still in a stone room, one that was no different from the stone rooms he had been in before. There was also a stone platform in the middle. At this point, Yang Kai had faintly guessed the role of this place from the various clues he noticed. Suppressing the joy in his heart, he stepped forward and came to the stone desk. He focused his gaze and found that there were a total of 3 identical herbs placed on the stone desk. Judging by the aura they were emanating, their grade shouldn't be that high. It should be about the level of origin grade. He stretched his hand out and brushed away the dust on the stone desk. Xianxia read the small text on the stone desk and immediately understood the purpose of this stone room. It was to actually refine the medicinal liquid. As long as the purity reached a certain level, the transmission array in the stone room could be activated. Refining medicinal liquid was nothing to Xianxia. He had refined medicinal liquid hundreds of thousands of times in alchemy so far. Furthermore, he also had the unique conflagration knowledge C, which made his job of refining medicinal liquid and removing all kinds of impurities from it easier. And extracting the medicinal liquid from an origin-grade herb was a piece of cake for him. At this point, he no longer hesitated and prompted his conflagration knowledge C, wrapping the herb inside. After a while, the herb was reduced into a drop of green liquid as its impurities continued to burn away, making the green liquid clearer and more brilliant. Because he had already guessed some things from the various tests here, Xianxia spared no effort to extract the medicinal liquid and did a perfect job. When he had refined all 3 herbs into the medicinal liquid, he placed them in the groove of the stone platform again. Immediately after, the familiar transmission array appeared again. Over the course of the next few days, Xianxia spent all his time in stone rooms. Each stone room gave a different test. Some required him to draw the spirit array used during refining pills, some required him to refine pills, some required a mastery of heat. The tests were numerous and strange. But the purpose of all the tests couldn't be separated from alchemy. At this point, Xianxia was completely sure that his previous conjecture was right. This was definitely Gong Sun Mu's test to check the mastery of later generations' alchemy techniques. He was an alchemy grandmaster, so it wasn't surprising that he would be testing in this aspect. As an alchemy grandmaster of his generation, he naturally hoped that his relics could be obtained by someone who was also an alchemist instead of some insignificant people. All those tests could completely determine whether a person was a qualified alchemist or not. Perhaps, Gong Sun Mu also wanted to find a successor for himself. In the stone room, Xianxia put his newly refined pill into the groove of the stone platform. After a while, the familiar feeling of transmission struck him as he disappeared again after a flash of dazzling light. When Xianxia finally regained his senses, he couldn't help but smile happily after looking at the surroundings around him, because the place where he was now wasn't the unvarying stone room, but a tunnel. The tunnel was abnormally dry. There was even a faint fiery radiance and a strange bubbling noise. The hot aura in the tunnel gave the feeling of falling into magma. Xianxia pushed his energy to defend himself as he walked towards the place where the fiery light was coming from. After a while, he entered a stone cavern. Heaven knows how deep under the ground this stone cavern was, but it didn't appear to be man-made. It seemed to have been formed naturally. There was a bright red fiery glow in the front. Xianxia narrowed his eyes and found that the source of the fiery glow was actually a stream of magma. The magma had gathered into a pool. From time to time, 1 or 2 bubbles would emerge from below and burst, splashing the magma around. The stone cavern was very large, and there were some other things besides the magma pool. Before Xianxia could take a careful look, Lu Yan's voice suddenly rang in his ear. "Master!" Having heard her shout, he promptly let Lu Yan out with a thought. Lu Yan didn't take the human form but maintained her firebird form, quietly hovering before Xianxia. Her eyes were completely glued on the magma pool in front. There was actually a sliver of longing in her gaze. "Is there something down there that's useful to you?" Xianxia immediately asked, noticing this. Lu Yan promptly voiced out her desire. "There seems to be something there, and it's not small. I will go check it out." As she spoke, she spread her wings and flew straight to the magma pool and plunged inside. "Be careful," Xianxia in the back hurriedly exhorted. But Lu Yan had already disappeared. He couldn't help but shake his head. Only then did he finally begin looking around. The stone cavern might be big, but it was empty. So the surrounding situation was clear at a glance. Very soon, Xianxia's attention was drawn to a certain place. There, a humanoid figure seemed to be sitting cross-legged. Xianxia furrowed his brow and immediately spread his divine sense. After a bit of scanning, he finally confirmed that the humanoid figure was just a skeleton. It had not even a bit of vitality and aura. Obviously, it should have died a long time ago. If I'm right, this should be Gong Sun Mu's corpse, an alchemy grandmaster of his generation, the third disciple of one of 10 great emperors, Wondrous Pill Great Emperor. He was supposed to be an outstanding master who had everyone in the star boundary at his beck and call. But then, he had met a tragic end in an insignificant place like the Yuan Furnace Mountain. Yang Kai couldn't help but sigh again and again. He had no idea how Gong Sun Mu offended the Wondrous Pill Great Emperor so much that the Wondrous Pill Great Emperor expelled him. His end was so bleak and lonesome that he had no one to even collect his body. Having set his mind, Yang Kai walked to the skeleton and cupped his fists and bowed slightly. In any case, Gong Sun Mu was an elder and, most important of all, an alchemy grandmaster. Even if he died here, he deserved this bow from Yang Kai. After standing straight, Yang Kai's gaze was immediately attracted by what was in front of Gong Sun Mu. Gong Sun Mu must have stayed here until he died. There was a small pot-like object not too far from him. This small pot looked like a wok used by ordinary people for cooking, but it was much smaller in size. And underneath the small pot was the earth fire which was burning below the pot. It was drawn using an array. What Yang Kai cared about wasn't this pot but the thing inside the pot. Surprisingly, a pot of thick medicinal soup was boiling in this pot. There wasn't much of it. It was only about a bowl, covering just the bottom of the pot. From time to time, a bubble would appear in the medicinal soup. And whenever it burst, it would emit a colorful glow. At the same time, a strange fragrance would permeate the cave. Yang Kai's expression changed as he smelled this fragrance. He was very familiar with this fragrance because it happened to be the very same fragrance he smelled outside the Yuan Furnace Mountain. Back then, outside the Yuan Furnace Mountain, many cultivators were lured over by the appearance of a phenomenon. Whether the sudden colorful glow and the wonderful fragrance filling the world, everything was very similar to the scene before him. Pondering look immediately appeared on Yang Kai's face. In that case, the phenomenon of the Yuan Furnace Mountain isn't because some precious treasure is about to mature, but because of this pot of medicinal soup. Yang Kai immediately became interested in this pot of medicinal soup. Even though he was 80% sure that this thick medicinal soup was not poisonous and could even bring great benefits to the cultivator, he did not dare to take it rashly before he properly understood the thing. He looked around and soon found a jade slip before Gong Sun Mu's skeleton. The jade slip seemed to have been placed by Gong Sun Mu himself before he died. From one glance, it was extremely clear that he had prepared it for the later generations to read. Yang Kai first checked it with his divine sense. Only after he was sure that there was no danger did he finally reach out to pick the jade slip. The moment he grabbed the jade slip, things suddenly changed. Gong Sun Mu, who should have been dead for years and had been reduced to nothing but a skeleton, suddenly moved. Immediately after, his eye sockets flickered with a pair of green glowing orbs that suddenly flew out and gathered into a ball of light that shot straight at Yang Kai. Yang Kai was taken aback. He quickly jumped back, and at the same time circulated the energy in his body to defend himself. But what horrified him was that the ball of light actually ignored his defensive energy and went straight into his chest, disappearing in a flash. In an instant, Yang Kai was frightened out of his senses and he broke into a cold sweat. He quickly scanned his body with his divine sense, but strangely found that he hadn't suffered any injuries. There seemed to be nothing wrong with his body. And after doing this, Gong Sun Mu's skeleton crumbled down on the ground, as if it had exhausted its last strength. The bones were incomparably fragile. Many of them broke apart. After a short while, everything returned to normal. Yang Kai, holding the jade slip in his hand, stood rooted in his place with an ugly look on his face. Just now, he had definitely triggered some kind of seal laid by Gong Sun Mu. And since he couldn't detect it with his divine sense, so this seal was obviously very well hidden. He couldn't dispel it either. After pondering for a long time, Yang Kai, gritting his teeth, sat down and poured his divine sense into the jade slip, reading it carefully. He felt that since Gong Sun Mu had intentionally left this jade slip, he must have left some clues that might help him know what happened just now. As his divine sense scanned through the jade slip, the content of the jade slip immediately became clear to him. I, Gongsun Mu, the third disciple of the wondrous pill Great Emperor, met the Great Emperor in my young and ignorant days, when I used to beg for a living. The Great Emperor didn't look down upon me and even took me as his disciple, teaching me the alchemic Tao. As expected, the jade slip was really left by Gongsun Mu, so this cave mansion indeed belonged to him. The information in the jade slip was very complicated. At first, it just had a memory of Gongsun Mu. He was a very unfortunate person. When he was young, he tasted the cold bitterness of the world, almost starving to death. At the same time, he was also a very lucky guy. He actually caught the notice of the wondrous pill Great Emperor. He was then taken as a low-ranked disciple, staying by the Great Emperor's side while cultivating and learning alchemy skills. My aptitude was far better than my two senior brothers, and the Great Emperor loved it very much. He taught me everything without hiding anything. My alchemy skills quickly surpassed the two senior brothers, and as I rose to fame at a young age, I grew proud and arrogant. I was out of control. When my senior brothers tried to mediate, I ridiculed them, creating discord between brothers. At the age of 300, I advanced to the Emperor realm and became an Emperor Great Alchemist as well. I became renowned in the star boundary, but that wasn't enough for me. I want to surpass the honored master in alchemic Tao. So, I started researching the way of the human pill, eventually hurting my life and heaven. First senior brother informed the honored master, and he was furious. He stopped me from researching it, but I couldn't accept it. I agreed on the surface but continued as before in private. I was beyond control. At the age of 350, my secret was exposed by the first senior brother again. I attacked senior brother in my anger, heavily injuring him. The honored master couldn't take it anymore and expelled me from his tutelage. I then found Yuan Furnace Mountain and lived here in seclusion. Almost all of Gongsun Mu's life was recorded in the jade slip. According to his own statement, his aptitude was almost comparable to the wondrous pill Great Emperor. Unfortunately, he seemed to be a little eager for success. In order to surpass the wondrous pill Great Emperor, he studied the way of the human pill. As for what the way of the human pill was, Gongsun Mu didn't say. But judging by the meaning in between the lines, Xianxia felt that it should be a very cruel alchemy technique. Obviously, the reason why he was kicked out of the tutelage had a lot to do with the way of the human pill. Of course, a part of the reason was that he attacked his senior brother, even severely injuring him. After he was kicked out, Gongsun Mu settled down in Yuan Furnace Mountain. After this life-changing experience, his temperament seemed to have changed a little, and he realized his mistake. He wanted to return to the wondrous pill Great Emperor many times, but he never met the wondrous pill Great Emperor. Finally, he died alone in this cave mansion. Apart from this, the jade slip also had Gongsun Mu's own understanding of the alchemic way. It could be said that this jade slip itself was Gongsun Mu's notes of alchemy, which was of great value to any alchemist. It had all kinds of pill recipes, spirit arrays used during refining pills, pill condensing techniques. It had all kinds of stuff. Every alchemist would go crazy for its contents. However, Gongsun Mu also stated in the jade slip that everything was the crystallization of his own life's wisdom. It had nothing to do with anything taught by the wondrous pill Great Emperor. Without the permission of the wondrous pill Great Emperor, he didn't dare to leave that knowledge in the jade slip. I don't know who you are, but since you have passed many of my tests and got this jade slip, it means that you are an alchemist as well. Now, you can be considered as my successor. And since the jade slip is in your hands, it means that you should have also been hit by my withered soul seal. The withered soul seal will not harm you within the next 100 years, but after 100 years, it will swallow your soul. There are only two ways to remove this seal. One is to have cultivation better than mine, and the other is to find my honored master and ask him to take action. I hope that you can meet my honored master in 100 years. Hand him this jade slip, and ask him to take me back under his tutelage. As compensation, you can take the 10,000 medicinal treasures soup for which I have worked so hard on for the rest of my life. You will realize its many benefits in the future. After this, there was nothing more mentioned in the jade slip. After having read it completely, Yang Kai heaved a long and deep sigh, squeezing the jade slip. He was finally free from the worries. At the very least, he now knew exactly what he was just hit with. Obviously, the withered soul seal should be a seal laid by Gong Sun Mu before his death. As long as anyone took the jade slip, the withered soul seal would be activated, penetrating into the body of the person who took the jade slip. This seal was harmless for 100 years, but it would swallow the soul after that. A century wasn't a short period, so Yang Kai wasn't worried about anything for the time being. As long as his cultivation exceeded Gong Sun Mu's within a century, he could remove this withered soul seal. Although Yang Kai had no idea about Gong Sun Mu's cultivation before his death, he should be in the Emperor realm for sure. Yang Kai was confident in reaching the Emperor realm in a century. What he was afraid of was that Gong Sun Mu might be a third-order emperor. In that case, he would need to become a great emperor, and only then could he remove the withered soul seal on his own. After thinking for a while, Yang Kai solemnly put away the jade slip. He had a free and easy disposition. So, knowing that it would be useless to mess around with the withered soul seal, he stopped paying attention to it. He turned his gaze back to the little pot of thick medicinal soup. According to the information left in the jade slip, the small pot of medicinal soul was the 10,000 medicinal treasures soup that Gong Sun Mu spent the remaining half of his life brewing. What ingredients were used to brew this 10,000 medicinal treasures soup and what its miraculous effects were, Yang Kai had no idea. But since it was compensation for the withered soul seal, obviously, it would be quite beneficial to take it. Furthermore, Gong Sun Mu's cave mansion had existed for a couple millennia, and it had been a very long time since he was alive. In other words, this pot of medicinal soup had been brewing for 1 or 2 millennia at the very least. It was thanks to the earth fire drawn by the array that it could continue to boil. Or else, it would have been reduced to nothing but a waste a long time ago. The Yuan Furnace Mountain had always been incomparably desolate. No cultivator paid attention to it, which should be Gong Sun Mu's handiwork. It wasn't difficult for an Emperor Realm Master to cause the people to misunderstand it as a barren mountain with a bit of disguise and some tricks to prevent the Yuan Furnace Mountain's world energy from leaking. The cultivators were finally drawn to this place because of the sudden appearance of intermittent colorful glow and the strange fragrance. And that phenomenon was obviously caused by this pot of soup. When a heaven-defying precious treasure was about to mature, or an extremely high-level artifact or pill was about to be refined, it would trigger a heavenly manifestation. The manifestation at the Yuan Furnace Mountain was obviously due to the successful brewing of this medicinal soup. Now that it had successfully brewed and was of great benefit to him, Yang Kai had no reason to let it go. He sat cross-legged before the small pot and used a bit of his energy to cut off the supply of earth fire drawn by the array. Immediately after, he reached out and picked up the small pot, bringing the pot of 10,000 medicinal treasures soup before himself. Observing it this closely, Yang Kai found that the medicinal soup was extremely thick and yet crystal clear. It didn't have the slightest bit of impurities. He could clearly see the bottom of the pot. Meanwhile, colorful bubbles continued to rise from the bottom, making for quite the magical sight. As the strong aroma entered his nose, Yang Kai felt refreshed. He had no words to describe the scent at the tip of his nose. Even the charming fragrance of the purest and holiest virgin body couldn't match this scent, and Yang Kai had never smelled anything that could leave such a lasting pleasant flavor. Along his journey to the third-order origin king realm, Yang Kai had not had a desire to taste something for a long while, and with his strength and physique, he didn't need to eat anything. But after this aroma entered his nose, his rare appetite was stirred, as if he hadn't eaten for many days. He couldn't wait to swallow this pot of soup. Gritting his teeth, Yang Kai brought the small pot to his mouth and started drinking. Strangely enough, the pot of 10,000 medicinal treasures soul seemed incomparably hot, but when it entered the mouth, it wasn't. On the contrary, its temperature was just perfect. Furthermore, its fragrance filled his entire mouth, and it was far more delicious than anything Yang Kai had ever eaten. There was only one bowl of 10,000 medicinal treasures soup. As such, he raised his head up and downed it in one go, not leaving a single drop behind. After a while, Yang Kai let out a loud burp, spurting a colorful glow. before he could relish the taste of the 10,000's medicinal treasure soup. His stomach suddenly became extremely hot as streams of heat quickly flowed through his limbs and bones like it was tangible, giving rise to an itching sensation. Yang Kai's face immediately changed. He hurriedly threw that small pot into the space ring and closed his eyes, regulating his breathing while silently circulating his cultivation technique. And after just 10 breaths of Yang Kai taking the small pot of 10,000 medicinal treasures soup from its place, the entire Yuan Furnace Mountain suddenly started quaking with deafening rumbles. The ground started shaking, rocks rolled down the mountain, and the peak fell to one side as the entire Yuan Furnace Mountain suddenly split into countless pieces and quickly sank down. Inside the mountain, in the countless identical stone rooms, all the cultivators who were still alive had a change in their expression. Just when they were wondering what the hell was going on, all the transmission arrays in the stone room were activated. In an instant, all the surviving cultivators disappeared from their positions. In the next moment, figures mysteriously appeared one after another about a dozen kilometers away from the Yuan Furnace Mountain. Everyone looked confused. "Brother Lien, you were sent out too?" hurriedly shouted Raging Fire Temple Vice Temple Master Zhong Qing, as he looked around and noticed a frowning Lien Yuming. Hearing the shout, Lien Yuming immediately turned his head to look at Zhong Qing. He was surprised to find Zhong Qing too. He nodded and replied, "Yes, it seems that you were also teleported out?" "That's right." Zhong Qing solemnly looked at the shaking Yuan Furnace Mountain and doubtfully asked, "What happened there? Why is everyone teleported out?" Lien Yuming thought for a while before asking, "Brother Zhong, did you come across stone rooms after you entered?" "Yes, and all kinds of weird tests as well. They seem to be related to alchemy. By the way, Brother Lien, you are proficient in alchemy. Those tests shouldn't be difficult for you." Lien Yuming slowly shook his head in response and replied, "This old master had only passed the 5th stone room. I have no idea what we would gain after passing all the tests, but judging by the tests, this cave mansion should belong to an alchemist." Hearing this, Zhong Qing pondered for a moment and agreed, nodding, "Brother Lien has a point. If that's the case, you can ask the other disciples if they have gained anything or not." While talking, Zhong Qing looked around, and when he noticed that only a half of his elite disciples were left, his expression finally changed. Right then, he focused his gaze on a nearby figure and asked in surprise, "It's you!" Not too far away, a helpless look appeared on Kong Si Ran's face. He too was sent out when the commotion of the Yuan Furnace Mountain started. And now, he happened to be caught in the middle of many Raging Fire Temple disciples. He didn't dare to act rashly so as to prevent other people from misunderstanding. At this moment, he was noticed by Zhong Qing. He was left with no choice but to cup his first and introduce himself. "Maplewood City Spirit Pill Plaza. Shopkeeper Kong Si Ran greets the 2 Vice Temple Masters." "Spirit Pill Plaza?" Lien Yuming's pupil constricted after hearing this. "Violet Source Chamber of Commerce's Spirit Pill Plaza?" "That's right." Kong Si Ran nodded, and at the same time he was finally relieved. He was really helpless this time and had no choice but to reveal his identity and origin. After all, his fists weren't bigger than the opposite party. All he could do was use the awe and prestige of Violet Source Chamber of Commerce to deter the opposite party. As expected, after having come to know Kong Si Ran's background, Zhong Qing and Lien Yu gazed at each other before withdrawing their previous hostility. The former then said, "This Zhong has heard of Spirit Pill Plaza. So your excellency is Spirit Pill Plaza's shopkeeper Kong. I'm sorry for not recognizing you." "Vice Temple Master Zhong, you are being too polite," Kong Si Ran replied calmly. "Shopkeeper Kong, do you know what happened inside the Yuan Furnace Mountain?" Zhong Qing asked in a deep voice. Kong Si Ran shook his head and replied, "This Kong is at a loss too. If I remember it correctly, Shopkeeper Kong had a friend with him. Where is he now?" Lien Yuming asked, immersed in his thoughts. Hearing this, Kong Si Ran's expression darkened. He glanced in the direction of the Yuan Furnace Mountain and sighed. Since Brother Yang has failed to appear here, he has obviously encountered something unexpected inside. "I see that your noble temple seems to be short of many disciples. This Yuan Furnace Mountain's tests aren't that simple. He really believed that Xianxia had fallen inside the Yuan Furnace Mountain. After all, even two Dao Source Realm Masters like Zhongqing and Lian Yuming were teleported out. It was natural to imagine the fate of those who were not teleported out like this. For a moment, Kang Si Ran could help but feel a little sad. On the one hand, it was because he couldn't find the much-needed Dao Source Pill in the Yuan Furnace Mountain, and on the other, it was because of Xianxia's death. Zhongqing and Lian Yuming gazed at each other before lightly nodding their acknowledgement. As they didn't notice any pretense in Kang Si Ran's expression, they have no intention of pestering him. Zhongqing said, "In that case, please restrain your grief, shopkeeper Kang. Please go back. In any case, the Yuan Furnace Mountain is within the domain of my Raging Fire Temple. We will be doing another search." How could Kang Si Ran not notice such an obvious order to leave? After a long sigh, he cupped his fists to Zhongqing and Lian Yuming before turning around and flying in the direction of Maplewood City. After a while, the entire Yuan Furnace Mountain completely collapsed with an earth-shattering crash. After everything returned to calm, Zhongqing and Lian Yuming led the remaining Raging Fire Temple disciples to search the ruins of the Yuan Furnace Mountain. But unfortunately, even after flipping the entire collapsed mountain for 2 months, they couldn't find anything. All they found were the corpses of a few disciples that had died tragically. 2 months later, the Raging Fire Temple disciples had no choice but to leave. Heaven knows how many feet deep underground, Xianxia was continuously roaring like a wounded beast in the stone cavern. If anyone heard his screams, they might immediately flee in fright. The efficacy of the 10,000 medicinal treasure soup was extremely strong and continuous. After he drank it, it transformed into streams of pure energy that surged to every nook and cranny of Xianxia's body. After his meridians and physique were eroded by its efficacy, they continuously grew tougher and stronger. The meridians widened and the physique remolded. Xianxia's entire body was violently shaking. Every inch of his body, his skin, and even his internal organs and marrow was stinging, as if tens of thousands of ants were gnawing his body. He was feeling as if he was suffering the most painful torture in the world. Bit by bit, his skin began to crack as golden blood flowed out, which slowly solidified into a blood clot. The outer surface of the blood clot was covered by the golden blood that flowed out again. Gradually, Xianxia's entire figure was covered in a golden blood cocoon. His figure couldn't be seen from outside. Only his strong heartbeat, which sounded much like war drums, could be heard. Heaven knows how long this lasted. 1 second, it seemed countless years, but then it seemed just a moment in another. And with the passage of time, Xianxia's roars coming from the blood cocoon gradually weakened before disappearing altogether, as if he had grown accustomed to this painful transformation. In a flash, half a year had gone by. The stone cavern remained calm and uneventful over this half year, and not a single sound was made. Today, cracking noises started coming from the blood cocoon around Xianxia all of a sudden. It sounded much like the popping of bones. They were extremely crisp and numerous. Followed by these sounds, a crack suddenly appeared in the blood cocoon. Immediately afterwards, more and more cracks started to appear on the blood cocoon, giving it a shattered mirror kind of look. Finally, the blood cocoon burst apart into countless pieces with a loud bang as Xianxia's stalwart figure emerged in the center. His upper body was naked and his black hair was flying along with the wind. His white skin was so white and tender that it was better than a newborn's. Xianxia slowly opened his eyes. The gleam in his eyes might be withdrawn, but there was a radiant look on his face. He tilted his head as a weird expression appeared on his face. At this moment, he was having a very different and strange feeling. He felt that he had gained a new life. He lowered his head to take a look at his body and was immediately shocked. He had been running about over the years, going through winds and rains. He went through all kinds of hardships that not only created his staunch character, but also forged him into an outstanding figure. But now, just a pot of 10,000 treasure soup had made his skin whiter and more tender than a woman's. He was rather surprised by this. He got up and exercised a bit, feeling lighter and stronger than before. When he slightly clenched his fist, Endless strength continuously gushed out from his body. He made a simple jab, but it immediately resulted in a sonic boom, causing ripples in the air that were visible to the naked eyes. Yang Kai beamed with joy at the sight of this. He immediately knew that his physical body had gained a significant upgrade. As he scanned himself with divine sense, he suddenly realized that his 5 viscera and 6 organs had actually changed. They looked like they had been carved from jade and gold while giving an unbreakable feeling. It wasn't like this before. Obviously, all of this was because of the 10,000 treasures soup. The 10,000 treasures soup seemed to be able to develop the physical potential of the cultivator and temper the cultivator's physical quality, supplementing his already powerful body. His strength had grown to a whole new level and had become even more outstanding. But things didn't just stop there. Yang Kai could clearly feel a large amount of 10,000 medicinal treasures soup's efficacy still remaining in his bones and physique. It was stored inside his body to silently transform his body over time. Yang Kai was very satisfied with this. So this is the effect of a medicine soup that had been brewed for over 1 or 2 millennia. It is far more effective than taking any pill. With my current physique, it's definitely possible to refine the dragon artifact. Yang Kai thought as he checked his own strength again. This check immediately gave him a big surprise. He found that all the Saint Qi in his body had been transformed into Source Qi. He couldn't find even the slightest bit of Saint Qi. Source Qi was a higher grade energy than Saint Qi. It was the very foundation of Tao Source Realm cultivators to communicate with the world principles and mobilize the power of heaven and earth. It was basically impossible for a cultivator to advance to the Tao Source Realm without the Source Qi. Yang Kai's perception of principles was already good enough. The reason why he couldn't advance to the Tao Source Realm was that the Saint Qi in his body had not been completely transformed. According to his previous calculations, it would have taken him 1 or 2 years to convert all his Saint Qi into Source Qi, even if he continued taking source condensing pills. But now, these conditions have been fulfilled in advance. Naturally, all the credit went to the 10,000 medicinal treasures soup. Yang Kai was inevitably a little ecstatic by this discovery. He was now ready to advance to the Tao Source Realm anytime. However, advancing to the Tao Source Realm was a very important thing, and this place wasn't suitable for world energy baptism. So, Yang Kai had no plans to advance here. He still needed to find a suitable location. Having thought of this, Yang Kai decided to leave. He looked around a bit, but there was nothing worthy of his attention in the stone cavern. However, Lu Yen had still not returned after she charged into the magma pool. He had no idea about the advantages she might have gained underneath. As he came to the side of the magma pool and checked, he surprisingly discovered that the temperature of the magma pool seemed to have significantly dropped. It seemed as if someone had sucked away all the internal heat. Yang Kai tried to communicate with Lu Yen, but he didn't get any response. However, this only made Yang Kai relieved and joyful. He knew that the reason why Lu Yen couldn't sense his summon was definitely because she had found her own opportunity. Considering all this, he simply stopped paying attention to Lu Yen and started looking for an exit. The stone cavern wasn't that big, and there was only one passage connected to it. He quickly found a transmission array at the other end of the passage. After activating the spirit array, he instantly disappeared from the stone cavern. In a barren ridge somewhere around 100 miles away from the Yuan Furnace Mountain, Yang Kai's figure emerged out of thin air. He promptly spread his divine sense, and after making sure that the surroundings were safe, he looked around to get his bearing before his figure shot toward the horizon, leaving a streak of light. Yang Kai wasn't planning on returning to Maplewood City. Currently, the most important thing for him was to advance to the Tao Source Realm. Thus, he needed to find a quiet and solitary place. A few days later, he landed on a barren mountain. After looking around at the surroundings, he lightly nodded, extremely satisfied. Although it was barren and the world energy was also scarce here, it was spacious and deserted. Very few people would visit this place. Unlike other cultivators who had friends, relatives, and sects to back them up, he didn't have anyone to guard him during his advancement. Thus, he had no choice but to use such a place. The lack of world energy was nothing. One only needed to place some source crystals around himself to get the world energy needed for advancement. However, just in case, he still spent 2 days carefully scouting the area of 2,000 kilometers. He beheaded some monster beasts that had settled here before finally returning. Advancing by a great realm was very important to any cultivator. It was different from when one broke through by a small realm. Once one failed to advance, they could very likely damage their martial Dao foundation. The cultivator might never recover from it. In severe cases, he or she might get killed under the world energy baptism. Naturally, Xianxia would be careful. Afterwards, he let the 2 blood beasts, the queen monster insect and blue flame thunder wolf, out, ordering them to keep a close watch in 2 opposite directions. I think with 2 blood beasts keeping guard, there should not be any major problems. After doing all this, he finally started to calm himself. He didn't try to immediately attack the bottleneck of the Dao source realm. Rather, he took out the black jade furnace and the jade slip left behind by Gong Sun Mu. On one side, he was refining the black jade furnace, leaving his soul and life brand in it, and on the other, he was going through the alchemy knowledge in the jade slip. A long time ago, Xianxia had tried to stabilize his mind and prepare to break through using alchemy. This method had been tried and tested time and time again. So, it would still come true this time as well. Time slowly passed, and Xianxia seemed to have completely forgotten his original intention of coming here. He was completely absorbed in the world of alchemy knowledge. The alchemy information left in the jade slip might be incomprehensible to others, but as someone who once triggered the grand alchemic Dao tone and had seen a glimpse of alchemic Dao ultimate knowledge, it was very easy for Xianxia to understand. He had memorized various pill recipes and the names of herbs in 1 month. In addition, the black jade furnace was successfully refined, succeeding the purple origin furnace as Xianxia's alchemy furnace. Today, Xianxia suddenly placed the black jade furnace before him and poured the conflagrated knowledge sea into the furnace. Suddenly, a scorching heat wave spread from the furnace. The next moment, a bunch of high-quality herbs flew out from his space ring with a flick of his finger, flying into the black jade furnace in an orderly manner. Under the scorching heat of his pure, conflagrated knowledge sea, they were slowly reduced into medicinal liquid before congealing into a ball. After a while, he put in new herbs. The temperature inside the black jade furnace kept on changing. From time to time, a bit of medicinal fragrance would leak out of it. Xianxia looked as calm as an old dried-up well. He wasn't the slightest bit nervous or impatient. Even his actions when dropping the herbs were slow and steady, but the change in temperature of the furnace was instant. One by one, the spirit arrays required for refining the pills rose and fell inside the black jade furnace as he engraved them with his conflagrated knowledge sea, producing a magical effect on the medicinal liquid. 3 hours later, a wooden box appeared in Xianxia's palm with a flip of his wrist. Under the push from his source chi, the wooden box opened by itself, revealing a longan-sized spirit fruit. Amazingly, it was the Dao source fruit that the Zhang family patriarch had given him back then. In this world, only one kind of pill could be refined from the Dao source fruit. The Dao source pill that could make all the third-order Origin King cultivator lust over it. If the Origin King realm masters knew that Xianxia was rashly trying to refine the Dao source fruit as an Origin King grade alchemist, perhaps all of them would want to kill him. The Dao source pill wasn't an ordinary pill. Its main ingredient was extremely rare. Out of the entire Southern Territory and Heavenly Martial Holy Land, there were only a handful of trees that could bear the Dao source fruit. Furthermore, the Heavenly Martial Holy Land used it for themselves. They would not sell them outside. So one could imagine the rarity of this pill. And all the alchemists who dared to refine the Dao source fruit into Dao source pills were all Dao source grade alchemists. No Origin King grade alchemist would ever dare to play with this kind of spirit fruit. But Xianxia did. If he succeeded, he would definitely be able to break through his alchemy bottleneck and advance to the Dao source grade in one fell swoop. If he failed, the priceless Dao source fruit would be reduced to ashes. As he took out the Dao source fruit, Xianxia's face that had been maintaining an indifferent expression finally turned a little solemn. But he still threw the Dao source fruit into the black jade furnace without a moment of hesitation. Immediately afterwards, he shut the furnace lid tightly and started making hand seals with a solemn look on his face. As he kept changing the hand seals, The medicinal liquid in the black jade furnace kept tossing and turning amidst gurgling sounds. Meanwhile, invisible spirit arrays rose and shattered in the black jade furnace, one after another, continuously. Beads of sweat started to appear on Yang Kai's forehead, as if refining the pill this time was extremely hard for him. This situation lasted for a whole 5 hours. Having been concentrating for this long, Yang Kai had expended a lot of his mental energy. He looked slightly haggard and pale. After 5 hours, he finally made the last hand seal and took a long, deep breath. He then quickly took out a few recovery-type pills and threw them into his mouth. The pill furnace was still humming as several different types of medicinal liquids merged inside and incredible changes were taking place. At a certain moment, a strange sound rang from inside the black jade furnace, followed by a strong medicinal fragrance that permeated into the surroundings. As a bit of fragrance drifted into Yang Kai's nose and made its way into Yang Kai's body, his martial Dao bottleneck that had reached a critical juncture showed a slight sign of loosening. The calm source qi in his body madly started flowing. Right then, Yang Kai opened his eyes and smacked the black jade furnace, causing its lid to instantly fly up. Immediately after, he quickly displayed the 9 heavens profound pill method that he had developed from the grand alchemic Dao tone. His hands kept forming seals in succession as he continuously poured his energy into the black jade furnace. After a short while, the noises coming from the furnace became more and more obvious. It sounded like something was rolling inside the furnace. Later, as Yang Kai withdrew his pill condensing technique, streaks of light suddenly shot out of the black jade furnace. Yang Kai had been waiting for this moment. He immediately reached out, catching the several streaking things in his palm. He didn't have time to take a closer look at the result of his alchemy. All he knew was that there were a total of 6 pills. He promptly placed the newly refined Dao source pills into the jade bottle that he had prepared in advance. Immediately after, he waved his hand as a large number of source crystals flew out of his space ring and fell on the ground, piling up in circles around him. Some time ago, Yang Kai had killed many powerful enemies. He had gained no less than 10 million source crystals from them, but for the sake of his own advancement, he threw out all 10 million of them. After all, the world energy here was pretty scarce, and to meet the necessary requirement for his own advancement, he could only use these source crystals. As soon as the source crystals appeared, a muffled thunder-like sound resounded above Yang Kai's head. Suddenly, the world energy became turbulent as the power of principles started to circle around Yang Kai. After a short while, a large black cloud appeared over Yang Kai's head. The cloud started slowly rotating and taking a funnel shape. Sand and rocks started to fly around everywhere as the sky went dark. Seemingly under the effect of some mysterious force, the source crystals thrown around Yang Kai suddenly burst apart with crackling explosions. They instantly transformed into streams of pure energy that filled the surroundings before converging in the sky. On the top of Yang Kai's head, the black funnel vortex was growing at a speed visible to the naked eyes. It was quite a shocking sight. The originally scarce world energy in the surrounding grew extremely dense after being supplemented by the source crystals. And the place where Yang Kai was sitting was soon shrouded by a white mist. The white mist wasn't real mist but a scene caused by the dense world energy. Yang Kai didn't seem to be aware of this. He was still sitting cross-legged on the ground with his eyes closed. He looked extremely calm and at peace. He was communicating with his origin essence crystal in his consciousness and feeling the heavenly way martial Dao. Meanwhile, the star source of shadowed star in his body happened to be regularly pulsating at this moment, as if it was being affected by something. With the blessing of this star source, Yang Kai could feel the power of the world principles around him even more clearly. He had absorbed many shattered principle fragments on the 3rd level of the 5-colored treasure pagoda, and at this moment, they were getting incisively sublimated so that Yang Kai could brand his own perception and sublimate his realm. With time, the black funnel in the sky grew larger and larger, almost covering the entire sky. Even though Yang Kai had chosen a desolate land for his advancement and had even spent a few days clearing the monster beasts within a range of 1,000 kilometers, some accidents were bound to happen. His advancement had caused such a huge commotion that he could still be noticed from a few thousand kilometers away. When the black funnel that had covered a small part of the sky took shape, many cultivators in the distance had noticed this scene. Naturally, their curiosity was piqued and they rushed to the place where Xianxia was advancing to check what was going on. After these cultivators figured out that someone was advancing by a great realm and was about to welcome the world energy baptism, most of the cultivators stopped, spectating from a few hundred kilometers away. The cultivation of these cultivators wasn't that high. After all, the overall strength of the cultivators in the vicinity of Maplewood City wasn't that good. Most of them were Origin King or Origin Returning Realm Masters, while there were even weaker ones as well. Sensing how strong and violent the energy in the sky was, how would they dare step forward? After having come to join in the fun, they gathered around and started discussing, pointing in Xianxia's direction. Among the crowd, there was a weak little girl in her 20s. She was only in the second-order Origin Returning Realm. Furthermore, she seemed to be suffering from some chronic disease and she was wearing a lot of clothes despite the warm weather. There were several Origin King Realm cultivators around her, guarding her. While the girl's pretty eyes were focused into the distance, she suddenly started coughing. The Origin King Realm Masters around her immediately looked at her with concern, but everyone seemed to be accustomed to this scene, so they didn't look too panicked. After the girl's breath stabilized, they finally withdrew their gazes. After a short while, a first-order Origin King cultivator hastily flew over from the distance and arrived before the girl in a few flickers. "Young lady, I am back," the cultivator quickly said. "Did you find out who is advancing?" The girl asked in a gentle voice, parting her lips. The cultivator shook his head and reported, "I'm sorry, young lady. The world energy there is too violent, and as that person is at a critical juncture of his advancement, I didn't dare to get too close. So I couldn't see who it was. But according to my observation, this person should be breaking through to the Tao Source Realm. As I've expected, he is indeed breaking through to the Tao Source Realm." The girl in purple seemed to have expected it. She gently nodded. Her eyes suddenly lit up as she spoke. Since that person decided to break through to the Tao Source Realm here, it means that he or she doesn't have friends or relatives, or a sect to back him. Obviously, that person is a lone master. He or she can be roped in. The Origin King Realm cultivators around the girl in purple slightly nodded in agreement after hearing this. If one had the backing of a sect or had friends or relatives, who would be willing to break through a great realm in this wilderness? Only a lone wolf would be forced to do this. That being said, young lady, with all due respect, this person might not be able to successfully break through. Another solemn-looking middle-aged man looked toward them and said with a serious look on his face, "Why do you think so?" The girl in purple turned her gaze at him. The middle-aged man wryly smiled. "The movement caused by him is just too great. It's not something a peak Origin King Realm cultivator can bear. I should not say this, but if he is unable to bear the baptism of the world energy, he simply has no hope of surviving. He will die for sure." All the other Origin King Realm repeatedly nodded their agreement after hearing this. They looked at the enormous black funnel in the sky with a look of fear. Obviously, if they were to take the baptism of such energy, it was absolutely impossible for them to succeed. The girl in purple furrowed her black brows. "So to say, this person has very little hope of succeeding?" The middle-aged man said, "Of course, that's just my opinion. If, and only if, he really survived this catastrophe and crossed this juncture, his future achievements will be probably beyond our imagination." The girl in purple nodded after hearing this. She pondered for a while and said, "Anyway, let's just protect him first. If he really advances, he will definitely remember our favor. At that time, we can try to recruit him. Now that the geniuses of my Qin family are declining, we can only rely on just old ancestors' support. We are hitting rock bottom, but if we can get this person's help, my Qin family can finally take a breath." Hearing this, the Origin King Realm cultivators nodded together and said, "If that's what young lady wants, then young lady's wish is our command." Just as this group of people were about to disperse and protect Xianxia, the previous middle-aged man furrowed his brow and he suspiciously gazed toward a direction and shouted, "Damn it! Someone is going to interfere with him. Who is it?" The girl in purple was taken aback when she heard this. She looked along with the middle-aged man's gaze and saw a streak of light shooting toward Xianxia's location. Not only were they not hiding their figures, but also had no intentions of hiding their goal. Each and every one was displaying an aggressive stance and malicious intention. By a rough count, there were at least a dozen people in that streak of light. And the leading figure in that light was particularly bright. The girl in purple hesitated for a while before she stomped her feet and said, "Come with me. Let's see if we can negotiate with them or not." While speaking, her tender figure flew toward that side with a jolt. The middle-aged man was greatly shocked. He hurriedly chased after her with others. Not far away, among the group of cultivators rushing toward Xianxia, someone soon discovered the Qin family group's movement. They immediately shouted to the front, "Honored Master, someone is coming toward us." At the forefront, an almost bald old man with a short and fat stature suddenly stopped after hearing this. His pair of triangular eyes focused into the distance before quickly locking on to the Qin family group. He then let out a cold snort and rebuked, "Several Origin King Realm cubs want to ruin this old master's good deed? I have to hand it to their courage. Honored Master, do you want us to?" The man made a gesture of beheading while he spoke this. A grim smile immediately appeared on the old man's face as he said, "Let's see what they want to say first. Since they dare to come here, they probably have something to rely on. This old master wants to see what is making them this courageous. Honored Master is wise." That middle-aged man immediately flattered. After a short while, the Qin family group, led by the girl in the purple, arrived before the old man and the others. The girl seemed to have expended a lot of her energy for this rush. He immediately broke into a fit of cough and couldn't speak a word. The middle-aged man and the others, who were closely following after her, gathered around the girl like the stars around the moon. And when the middle-aged man noticed the leading short and fat old man and his iconic bald head, he cried in shock as his face turned pale as if he was facing an enemy. "Ghost Hand Shin Tu!" As soon as he shouted "Ghost Hand Shin Tu," the Qin family cultivators turned pale. They unconsciously tried to explain themselves while they started mobilizing the energy in their body to be ready to make a move at a moment's notice. A trace of panic also appeared in the pretty eyes of the girl in purple as well. She might be young, but she was extremely knowledgeable and experienced. Not to mention, every cultivator in the vicinity of Maplewood City was aware of Ghost Hand Shin Tuesday. Ghost Hand Shin Tu was a first-order Dao Source Realm cultivator. Heaven knows what evil arts he was cultivating, but he was extremely vicious and committed outrageous crimes around Maplewood City all year round. Relying on his powerful Dao Source Realm cultivation, he robbed and killed the weaker cultivators. For many cultivators, the 4 words Ghost Hand Shin Tu were tantamount to a disaster. Once they encountered this guy, it meant that their death wasn't far from them. Furthermore, this guy was not alone. Heaven knows where he got a bunch of powerful subordinates, but each and every one of them was an Origin King Realm master. Most weren't their match. All they could do was stretch their necks out to be beheaded. And this guy wasn't just vicious but was also extremely clever. The City Lord's mansion had sent a team of masters, led by City Lord Duan Yuan Shan, to encircle and catch this guy many times. But it was all in vain. They couldn't catch him. They could only inflict serious injuries to him but ultimately let him escape. Since then, Ghost Hand Shin Tu seemed to have become honest and law-abiding for a while. But well-informed people knew that he was far from being law-abiding. However, he was no longer as unscrupulous as before. Now, his targets were people with no background and support. He no longer antagonized the members of families in Maplewood City and the disciples of the nearby sects. So to say, the masters of those families and sects were too lazy to care about him. And City Lord's mansion couldn't focus their forces on Ghost Hand Shin Tu forever. Besides, he was as cunning as a fox. All these reasons helped him run scot-free up until now. It was just a coincidence that Xianxia's choice of location for his advancement wasn't too far from Shin Tu and his men's turf. So, just as Xianxia's advancement caused the commotion, they immediately came to check. So after figuring out that Xianxia was a cultivator with no backing and was on the verge of breaking through, how could this group sit still? Naturally, they immediately moved out, preparing for a big fight. But here, they ran into a group of people from the Qin family. Hearing the shocked cry of that middle-aged man, the bald old man sneered. "So, you know all about this old master, and yet you dare to come here. Are you looking to die?" Just as he said this, the Origin King realm cultivators by his side stared at the Qin family's group with a malicious gaze. By the looks of their stances, it looked as if they would promptly attack them with just an order from Ghost Hand Shintu. The middle-aged man's expression changed slightly. He gulped loud in terror. He had no idea how to answer for a while. The girl in purple seemed to have regained her energy after catching her breath for a while. She smiled and spoke in a gentle voice. "So, it is the famous Senior Shintu." Junior had eyes but failed to see and rushed to Senior. "I hope that Senior will not blame us." "Oh?" Shintu narrowed his triangular eyes, glancing at the girl in purple. He let out a burst of weird laughter as he said, "Wow, you can still remain so calm in front of this old master. I have to hand it to your courage. Which family are you from?" Shintu had been wandering around Maplewood City all year round. Naturally, he could tell at a glance that the girl in purple was someone with a background. Otherwise, she would not have such etiquette. Had it not for this reason, why would he talk to the girl in purple? With his personality, he would have already killed her. "Junior's surname is Qin," the purple-robed girl gently replied. "Qin." Shintu curled his lips as he indifferently continued. This old master had heard that there is a little girl in Maplewood City's Qin family who is young and ill, but is very clever and quick-witted. Even Qin Zhaoyang, that old fart, dotes upon her. For this reason, he even went to the depths of the Black Blood Swamp to find a pure yang fruit to extend her life. "Could that be you?" The girl in purple coughed a little before nodding. "Senior is quite knowledgeable and experienced. This junior is indeed Qin Yu, who could only survive thanks to old ancestors' pity." "Ha ha!" Shintu broke into a peal of weird laughter. "Little girl, you are really outstanding. You can face this old master with no change in your expression. No wonder that old fart, Qin Zhao Yang, dotes upon you. But little girl, what can this old master do for you?" Qin Yu furrowed her black brow and pondered for a moment before replying. "Senior, since you have asked, this junior will be honest with you." "Senior, are you going to bother that person?" Shintu narrowed his eyes and said in neither rude nor polite manner, "So what?" Qin Yu asked, "Senior, can you let that person go?" Shintu pursed his lips and said, "Give me a reason. That person is my Qin family's honored guest." "So," Qin Yu replied in a low voice, "so, I hope that Senior can show mercy. My Qin family will definitely thank you for this someday." "Your Qin family's honored guest?" Shintu pursed his lips into a playful smile as he said, "Little girl, you might be smart but don't treat others as fools. If this person was really the honored guest of your Qin family, why would he choose to break through here? If he really is your Qin family honored guest, wouldn't that old fart, Qin Zhaoyang, be personally protecting him? Do you really think this old master is such a fool?" Even after having been exposed to her face, Qin Yu still didn't look even the slightest bit embarrassed. Rather, she smiled and said, "Senior's eyes are as bright as a torch. Junior's little trick can't fool you. However, although that person isn't my Qin family's honored guest now, it doesn't mean that he will not be in the future. Can I beg Senior to raise his high hand in mercy?" Before Qin Yu could finish herself, Shintu interrupted her by raising his hand. Shintu looked at her coldly. His triangular eyes radiated a chilling aura as he said, "Little girl, this old master will not haggle over this because of Qin Zhao Yang's face. But if you dare to pester again, don't blame this old master for not showing mercy." While speaking, he reached out as he shot a large amount of energy straight at Qin Yu. Qin Yu's expression changed as she hurriedly retreated. Seeing this, the vigilant Origin King realm masters gathered around her and rushed forward to block the wave of energy for her. They immediately let out muffled groans as several people backed away a fair distance before they could regain their footing. When they finally turned their gazes ahead, Shintu had already flown away with his group of men. Fear could still be seen lingering on the middle-aged man's and others' faces. The middle-aged man looked back at Qinyu and said, "Young lady, you didn't get hurt, did you?" Qinyu shook his head and said, "Thanks to everyone's protection, I am all right. But unfortunately, that person—" She gazed into the distance with a gloomy look on her face. The middle-aged man immediately tried to comfort her. "In fact, you don't need to feel sorry for him. That person might not be able to survive the world energy baptism. There is no difference between dying a bit earlier or dying a bit later. Young lady has tried her best. Next time, it would be best if you don't try to provoke the ghost hand Shin Tuesday. He let us go because of our old ancestor, but we might not be lucky next time." "I see. I have caused everyone trouble." Qinyu gently nodded. In the distance, Yang Kai appeared to be completely oblivious to this. He was still immersed in comprehending his own martial Tao heavenly way, immersed in his attempt to break through the barrier of the Tao source realm. Swish, swish, swish. A series of swishing sounds rang as Shintun, leading a dozen or so Origin King realm, appeared next to Yang Kai. When he sensed the violent energy fluctuations and looked up at the huge black funnel in the sky, Shin Tu's expression couldn't help but slightly change. He too had gone through this before. But back when he was advancing to the Tao source realm, even if he had caused such a big commotion, it couldn't even be compared to 1/10 of this. Even if he was asked to go through this level of world energy baptism now, he wasn't that sure that he would be able to safely go through with it. "Honored Master, it's very terrifying here. Let's just do it and get out of here." A nearby Origin King realm cultivator seemed to have been overwhelmed by the mighty pressure of heaven and earth. He was trembling and his forehead was drenched in a cold sweat. The others also didn't look relaxed. When they stepped in here, they felt that something was wrong here. The principles lingering around here were so dense and chaotic that they were finding it difficult to circulate their energy. Shintu nodded his agreement and immediately rushed to the cross-legged Yang Kai on the ground and said, "Kid, if you want to assign blame, blame your bad luck. Why do you have to choose this kind of place for your advancement? Be careful in your next life." After having said his piece, he raised his hand and fiercely smacked it down. Seeing him making a move, the other Origin King realm cultivation immediately displayed their martial skills one after another, launching their attacks at Yang Kai. But before their aura from their attacks could even touch Yang Kai, a dazzling light suddenly appeared about 10 meters away from Yang Kai's body. The light seemed to be oval-shaped and enveloped Yang Kai's entire figure. Bang, bang, bang. All the attacks fell on this light screen, creating ripples after ripples. But all of these attacks couldn't crack this shield. Everyone was stunned at the sight of this. Right then, Yang Kai slowly opened his eyes and indifferently gazed at everyone before saying, "Why do some people always think that they have lived too long and are eager to die? Why?" Every Origin King realm cultivator, who was being stared at by him, had their hearts gripped with a chill. They felt as if something bad was about to happen. Just as everyone was in a daze, Yang Kai raised his hand. Suddenly, moon blades flew out in succession, swishing through the air. "Damn it, quickly hide!" someone shouted. But the moon blades were so fast that they didn't give these people the time to react and struck them. Although some cultivators instinctively activated their defensive skills, these defensive skills couldn't even stand the power of the paper-thin moon blade. The pitch-black moon blades instantly cut through the cultivators as they let out muffled groans. Surprisingly, no blood splattered. But when the cultivators looked around, their faces turned pale in horror, because they saw crescent-shaped holes in different places of the bodies of the companion next to them. The wounds were completely flat. Heaven knows where the parts of their bodies that should have been there went. They couldn't find any pieces of flesh or broken bones anywhere. It seemed as if everything had been exiled into the void. And through these wounds, the squirming internal organs left a horrifying image in their eyes. The intense visual impact caused the several cultivators to scream in horror. Squish, squish, squish. Finally, the blood squished out of their wounds. In an instant, several cultivators around Yang Kai fell down on the ground with a look of incredulity on their faces. The gushing blood was mixed in with broken internal organs. The sight was too ghastly and bloody to look at. Shin Tu and the others barged in with an aggressive bearing. They believed that Yongkai would be powerless to fight back, owing to his advancement, but how could they have known that more than half of the Origin King realm cultivators would die when they finally went against the opposite party? This kind of accident had naturally made the remaining people lose their wits. But Yongkai wasn't done yet. Immediately after the moon blades, a large number of five-colored lights shot over. Just the fearsome chi emanating from the oncoming attacks had already sent chills down the spine of the surviving cultivators as they broke into a cold sweat. Sword chi. Shin Tu's expression changed. At a glance, he could immediately tell that these colorful streaking glows were hiding extremely sharp sword chi inside them. Furthermore, they were actually filled with the five elements. Under the mutual restraint and promotion of five elements, metal, wood, water, fire, and earth, they seemed to be harmonizing with each other, strengthening each other's might. His expression suddenly became solemn. He promptly let out a war cry as his short and fat figure grew bigger all of a sudden. Immediately after, a dark aura suddenly started to spread from his fat body, enveloping him inside. Countless black tentacles grew out of his body, waving around him. He was counterattacking the oncoming sword chis with his own attacks. A series of shock waves spread into the surrounding area as the tentacles extending from Shin Tu's body were torn apart by countless sword chis. At the same time, those fierce sword chis were also blocked by him and couldn't kill anyone. All the Origin King realm masters who had been saved gratefully looked at him. One of them even tried to kiss Shin Tu's ass even when his heart was pounding in fear. "Kid, you actually dare to attack this old master when you are advancing. I think you have grown tired of living. If that's the case, let me take your life." Shin Tu screamed as a small shield with a ghost head suddenly appeared in his hand. The small shield didn't look that big, but the ghost head on it was quite vivid and lifelike. It had fangs and its face was blue. It was extremely hideous and terrifying. He then poured his source chi into the ghastly shield. Suddenly, the small shield transformed into a real ghost head and grew into the size of a house all of a sudden, flying straight at Yongkai. While rushing at Yongkai, the ghost head opened and closed its mouth, shooting balls of silver ghost fire, one after another. The balls of fire shot straight at Yongkai like arrows. They seemed extremely powerful. Yongkai's pupils involuntarily shrank at the sight of this, but he still remained cross-legged. In the blink of an eye, the silver balls of ghost fire were already upon Yongkai. In the next moment, they landed right on Yongkai's body, wreaking havoc at Yongkai's position. Shin Tu was taken aback. His eyes were filled with surprise. He hadn't expected Yongkai to be killed this easily. He had a pretty good idea of how powerful his artifact was. From the get-go, its attacks were very strong and mysterious, and coupled with the secret technique he was cultivating, not to mention an Origin King Realm Master, even a First-Order Dao Source Realm Cultivator would be burned by the ghost fire, and would have a layer of his or her skin and flesh burn if not end up dead. However, Yongkai was just a Third-Order Origin King and was just on the cusp of breaking through. How could he still be alive after having suffered so many ghost fire attacks? Having thought like this, Shin Tu lightly nodded, believing that he had succeeded. And seeing Yongkai swallowed by the ghost fire, the surviving Origin King realm experts let out a series of sneers, seemingly mocking Yongkai's overconfidence. But their laughter hadn't even stopped before a figure appeared out of thin air right where Yongkai was. It was none other than Yongkai. By the looks of his appearance and state, he didn't seem to have been burnt by the ghost fire at all, and he hadn't even moved an inch from his position. No one knew how he avoided those ghost fire attacks. Everyone's laughter abruptly stopped. Shin Tu's eyes bulged in shock as a look of incredulity took over his face. Right then, Yongkai's left eye suddenly flickered with a golden speck of light as the demon eye of annihilation slowly emerged. The golden speck of light seemed tangible. It quickly took the shape of a lotus flower in Yongkai's left eye. Shin Tu's heart was suddenly gripped with a chill at the sight of this lotus flower. He instinctively knew that something was wrong, but somehow or other he was unable to look away. The lotus flower seemed to have a mysterious allure, which drew in his complete attention. The lotus slightly trembled before it disappeared from Yongkai's left eye. Instead, A budding lotus was slowly blooming in Shentu's knowledge sea. The nutrient for this bloom was his soul energy. Shentu let out a miserable scream. He felt like his mind was being pierced by tens of thousands of needles. This pain went deep into the soul, and he was almost unable to stand it. When Shentu started screaming, the remaining Origin King Realm Masters jumped back in fright. They immediately focused their gazes at Shentu to see what was going on. And right then, sounds of something ripping through space rang as untold moon blades, thicker than before, shot straight at them. They might have learned the lesson from the actions of those people before, but how could they still not be clear about how fearsome the moon blades were? Immediately, a series of miserable screams rang. But just as they were about to scatter, "Solidify!" Xianxia shouted aloud. Immediately after, the power of principles suddenly started undulating as the space within 1,000 meters of him seemed to have heard some kind of order. It instantly surrendered to him and turned extremely solid in the next moment. Those Origin King Realm Masters became as slow as turtles all of a sudden. Pooh pooh pooh. The moon blades easily went through their bodies, dividing them into halves. Everyone had a crescent-shaped gap in their bodies, and the parts they were missing were exiled into the endless void. The mutilated corpses slid down on the ground. Everyone's eyes were bulging as they died dissatisfied. So these are space principles? After everything went smoothly, Xianxia seemed to be immersed in thoughts. He forgot that there was still a powerful enemy he had not dealt with and fell straight into a kind of mystical epiphany. His mind was filled with inspiration as the true meaning of space principles poured into his mind in a flash. His figure jolted. He was momentarily stunned. His eyes were gleaming brightly. Various ideas flashed in his mind at lightning-fast speed as he comprehended the space principles. One after another, the spatial cracks started to appear and disappear around him as they continued to improve under the supplement of world principles. Where he was sitting, the space seemed no longer stable and vision had already started to distort. Ah! A wailing scream suddenly rang nearby. It was Shentu, whose tossing and turning after having been struck by the blossoming lotus secret technique started to slow down, as expected from a Tao Source Realm Master. Although he was struck by Xianxia's blossoming lotus secret technique and his soul's energy was mostly drained, he woke up at the last minute, avoiding a tragic death. Even so, his foundation was severely damaged. So much of his soul energy had been drained that his soul was damaged. Such an injury could not be restored with ordinary elixirs. Shentu would need to find some top-grade pill that could repair the soul or cultivate some special secret art. Even then, it would take him several dozen to over 100 years before he could finally recover from the damage to his soul. Somehow enduring the pain in his mind, he immediately looked around, but his heart involuntarily started pounding in the next moment. He found that all the Origin King Realm cultivators he had brought were completely dead. Not a single cultivator was alive, and the murderer was still sitting cross-legged in his original place. His eyes were gleaming with a radiant glow as if he had caught in some epiphany. Some incredible changes were taking place in the space around him. Spatial cracks were slithering around like snakes, covering an area of several dozen feet around Xianxia. Tao of space! Shentu's pupils shrank as he cried out in horror. This might probably be the best moment for him to make a sneak attack because Xianxia was already immersed in his epiphany. He couldn't react, but Shentu wasn't sure that he could rush through that strange space. Each of those space cracks was sharper than the best blade in the world. They weren't something he could block with his physique, so if he really launched a sneak attack, he might be cut into pieces by the countless space cracks around Xianxia. It's actually the Tao of space. This kid. At this moment, Shentu finally understood what kind of enemy he had provoked. Beads of cold sweat trickled down his forehead. He cast a final glare of hatred at Xianxia before he turned around and flew toward the outside, wanting to escape from here. He didn't want to stay here any longer. He just wanted to escape as far as possible. But before he could even reach 30 meters away, crystal snowflakes suddenly appeared in the sky. The snowflakes strangely appeared beautiful. They were completely white and flawless. The surrounding temperature started to plummet. Shen Tu started shivering for no reason as an aura of death blew on his face. As a veteran in battle, Shen Tun instantly realized that things were far from good. He promptly let out a war cry as thick black qi gushed out of his body again, wrapping him and resisting the chill invading his body. After doing all this, Shen Tu finally got a clear sight of the initiator of all this. It was a huge monster insect that was 2 feet tall and whose entire body was white and crystal clear. Shen Tu had no idea when this monster insect appeared in front of him. It seemed to have been here all the while, but he somehow failed to notice it. The monster insect was exuding a daunting ice-cold aura. The strangest thing about this beast was that there were actually 2 long swords on the 2 pincers on the front of this monster insect, one blue and one purple. They were crossed horizontally in front of the monster insect, posing an extremely strange posture. It gave the appearance of a mighty human swordsman, the bearing of a master. What the heck is this? Shen Tu couldn't help but cry in shock. His eyes were bulging wide. What he had seen today had gone beyond everything he had seen and known his entire life. First, he encountered an Origin King realm who was proficient in Tao of Space. Well, that was still fine and okay. Although it was difficult to cultivate the Tao of Space, some people in the star boundary had succeeded in doing so. Only they weren't as horrifying as that kid. And now, a powerful insect had appeared in front of his eyes. What Shen Tu found it harder to accept was that the monster insect also knew how to use artifacts. And it was a twin sword type artifact. That artifact should be of high-rank Origin King grade? Shen Tu was completely shocked. While he was reeling from the shock, the monster insect in front of him suddenly started rotating the 2 long swords on its pliers. Purple and blue lights flickered as the surrounding temperature started to drop. The snowflakes in the sky grew even larger. With a flash of white light, an icy cold domain suddenly spread through the surroundings. At this moment, Queen Monster Insect disappeared in front of Shen Tu and appeared directly behind him, still maintaining that weird posture as if it had never moved. Shen Tu stood there in a daze. His lips moved as if he wanted to say something but couldn't. Right then, a piece of snowflake fell on the top of his head. Next, Shen Tu's body, with the point where the snowflake fell as the center, suddenly split into 2 with a soft pop. Red blood immediately gushed out from his split body as his internal organs fell on the ground. Ghost Hand Shen Tu, who had been terrorizing Maplewood City for so many years, had died in such a mysterious way. And in the next moment, Queen Monster Insects disappeared into thin air with a slight jolt of its figure. No one knew where it went or where it was hidden. All the snow falling from the sky melted away as the ice-cold domain covering the surroundings disappeared into a puff of smoke. The crowd of onlookers in the distance broke into an uproar at the sight of this. Everyone's eyes were bulging wide with shock after witnessing everything from the distance. Even though they were unable to make out the details clearly and couldn't tell what exactly happened, they had clearly seen the death of dozens of Origin King realm cultivators and Shen Tu's fall. Such a strong visual impact gave them the feeling of seeing a ghost in broad daylight. No one could believe what they had seen. Some people kept rubbing their eyes as if they wanted to see more clearly. Shen Tu is dead? After a long time, someone murmured this sentence. It sounded like he wasn't sure. Shen Tu really died, killed by that man. No. Shen Tu wasn't killed by that man but by another master. That's right. A strong master seems to be protecting him. Fortunately, I didn't go attack that man or else. Many onlooking cultivators secretly rejoiced. They felt like they had escaped a disaster. After realizing that Yang Kai wasn't advancing here alone but was secretly guarded by a master, how could these onlooking cultivators dare to stay there? After discussing for a while, they all retreated by several dozen kilometers, watching everything from a farther distance, fearing that they would annoy the master who was secretly guarding. On the other side, the Qin family group was also dumbfounded. When Shen Tu and the others passed by with an aggressive momentum, no one had ever thought that their entire team would be wiped out at the end. Did you see who killed Shen Tu? Qin Yu asked, a little excited. Her beautiful eyes bloomed with a strange glow as she focused her gaze in the direction where Queen Monster Insect disappeared. Shen Tu was a First-Order Tao Source Realm Master. Anyone who could kill him after just one encounter should at least be a second-order Dao source realm. If she could draw this person into the Qin family, the Qin family's strength could instantly rise to the level of the City Lord's mansion. In the future, the Qin family would have a powerful protector. But unfortunately, Queen Monster Insect was too fast in her attack and even faster in her disappearance. Qin, you didn't get the time to see it clearly. Hearing her question, the Qin family cultivators looked at each other before they all shook their heads. The middle-aged man said, "Young lady, although I didn't see it clearly, that person seemed to be using twin sword artifacts. Is there a master in the vicinity of Maplewood City using this kind of artifact?" Twin swords. Qin Yu appeared to be immersed in her thoughts before she shook her head and said, "I have never heard of anyone using twin swords. It's extremely difficult to use them, and if there is a master proficient in twin swords near Maplewood City, I would have definitely heard of him. It seems that this person should be from outside." After hearing this, the Qin family cultivators secretly nodded in agreement. It's not just the protector who is powerful, but the person advancing is definitely extraordinary. Qin Yu pursed her red lips. Her pretty eyes shone with brilliance as she gazed in Yang Kai's direction. She seemed to want to see it clearly. Unfortunately, she couldn't see Yang Kai's appearance clearly owing to the dense world energy surrounding him. The middle-aged man nodded and said after hearing this, "Yeah, this person was able to kill more than a dozen Origin King realms at a critical juncture of his breakthrough. Obviously, he is quite extraordinary. Moreover, the thing that's puzzling me the most is why Shin Tu suddenly ran away." Qin Yu's expression changed as she said, "Shin Tu is cruel and ruthless. He would only escape if he had suffered a great loss at that person's hand. Young lady, that's not possible, right? This person is only a third-order Origin King. He still hasn't advanced to the Dao Source Realm, while Shin Tu is a Dao Source Realm master." The middle-aged man looked shocked. "Then have you seen any third-order Origin King cause such a big commotion while breaking through by a great realm? Look there, even space looks like it's collapsing a little." Qin Yu pointed in a direction. The middle-aged man laughed in embarrassment. "I am only a third-order Origin King. How would I get the chance to see anyone break through to the Dao Source Realm? But, even without seeing, I don't think anyone would be able to cause such a huge scene. That's right. The stronger one is, the greater the baptism created." Qin Yu's eyes rolled as she chuckled and said, "I am getting more and more interested in this person. If I can recruit him." The middle-aged man, seeing his young lady excited, knew that she was really interested in soliciting him. He then reminded, "Then we will have to wait for him to be finished with his breakthrough." Qin Yu gently nodded, muttering to herself, "He should succeed." At this moment, a clap of thunder suddenly resounded in the sky. It was extremely loud and deafening, as if the entire world was about to split apart. The next moment, the black funnel spinning in the sky suddenly started to come down as if it was attracted by some power. And the center of the black funnel happened to be pointed at the place where Yang Kai was. Hong hong hong. The sky shook and the earth quaked as the huge black hole quickly connected with Yang Kai. The next moment, an unimaginable amount of energy of heaven and earth flowed down the funnel, crazily pouring into Yang Kai's body. Impossible! Qin Yu's pretty face turned pale at the sight of this. The expressions of the Origin King realm cultivators gathered around her also changed. The middle-aged man shook his head with disappointment as he stated, "How heaven-defying is this guy to make the heavenly way do this much to stop him? It seems that he won't survive." When cultivators break through a great realm, they would trigger the world energy baptism. However, every cultivator's baptism had a regular pattern, which gave the cultivator room to breathe and restore. Never had there been anyone like Yang Kai, who would have the world energy directly connected to their bodies when he or she advanced. This way, the funnel-shaped heaven and earth energy would be continuously poured into Yang Kai's body. It would be impossible for him to have a chance to breathe. How could a third-order Origin King take this? This was not baptism but pure destruction. Even if a Dao Source Realm tried this, he too might be crushed into nothing in face of this. The earth seemed to quake more and more severely. Even the cultivators, who were watching from afar, could feel how violent world energy was. It was not something a human could resist. Each and everyone's face turned pale. Suddenly, fierce gales started to blow over from a distance. In an instant, the area within 100 kilometers had dust and pieces of rocks flying everywhere, covering the entire sky. Qin family cultivators surrounded Qinyu and mobilized their defensive skills to protect against the oncoming pieces of rocks and wood. Suddenly, someone's roar resounded amidst the howling winds in the distance. It sounded much like the howl of a wounded beast. Everyone was startled by this. Naturally, this howl belonged to Xianxia, who was in the middle of that berserk energy. The moment heaven and earth energy baptism fell on his body, Xianxia realized that he was in big trouble this time. His clothes were destroyed in the blink of an eye as untold amounts of energy poured on the top of his head, into his body from the acupuncture points, and flowed into every nook and cranny of his body. His firm and strong body only persisted for less than 10 breaths before his skin cracked. His meridians swelled and started aching. He felt as if his entire body would blow up any moment. The golden blood spread around his body, making his entire body shine. It immediately displayed its strong restorative properties. The cracked skin and torn muscles started to repair themselves, but they would often crack again just as they were repaired. Just when he wanted to burn his pure golden blood to maintain his blood and vitality, he suddenly felt a gentle energy emerging from his flesh, blood, and meridians. As soon as this energy appeared, it quickly started repairing his broken body as well. At the same time, his unstable vitality suddenly started rising. The pressure was greatly reduced. Xianxia smiled happily. He hurriedly held on to the slightest bit of clarity he had regained as he opened his mind and body to accept the berserk world energy, while also checking the condition of his body. The situation of his body was much better than he had imagined. All this was due to the gentle energy that had appeared out of nowhere. Soon, Xianxia figured out what this energy was. Surprisingly, it was the leftover efficacy of the 10,000 medicinal treasures soup that he had taken before. He might have entered a retreat for half a year in the stone cavern after taking the 10,000 medicinal treasures soul and focused all his time and effort on absorbing the medicinal efficacy, making his physique have a qualitative change. But the medicinal efficacy of the 10,000 medicinal treasures soup was just too much for him, so he was not able to absorb it completely. The remaining medicinal efficacy was stored in his flesh and bones. Only now did it emerge autonomously, becoming one of Xianxia's assets to help him in advancement. After getting the gist of the matter, Xianxia finally calmed down. When the medicinal efficacy of the 10,000 medicinal treasures soup continuously emerged from his flesh and bones, Xianxia didn't find the pressure that big anymore. His body was no longer hurting, his meridians were no longer aching, and his bones were no longer creaking. Now, filled with joy, he carefully circulated his own strength as he attacked the Tao Source Realm bottleneck. Over time, under the world energy baptism, whether it was his physical body or the energy in his body, it seemed to have gone through a peculiar sublimation, becoming stronger and purer. Especially the source qi in his body, it had grown a lot purer. It would have taken him a fair number of years in bitter cultivation to achieve this. This pleasant surprise made him ecstatic. Half a day later, there was a cracking sound from the depths of his soul, as if some barrier in his body had collapsed. Xianxia suddenly opened his mouth and let out a long cry. The roar was loud and reverberating as thunder, immediately resounding throughout the sky. And during this roar, the bottleneck that had been stopping Xianxia from advancing seemed to have been broken through, allowing Xianxia's already strong aura to suddenly rise to another level. He had smoothly broken through to the Tao Source Realm. A cry suddenly spread across the wild from the top of the barren hill. Everyone could make out the joy and excitement from this cry. The middle-aged man of the Qin family stood rooted on the spot for a long time, confused and shocked. Finally, he murmured with difficulty, "He actually succeeded." He simply couldn't believe his eyes. After all, the turmoil caused by the person who was advancing was simply too much. It wasn't something a third-order origin king realm cultivation could bear. But at this moment, that person really succeeded and broke through to the Tao Source Realm. The shock the middle-aged man experienced was far greater than he would feel if he suddenly broke through to the Tao Source Realm. The nearby Qin Yu was also shocked. Although she faintly felt that the person would not fail that easily, when the other party's advancement really went smoothly, she found it a little hard to accept. Her pretty eyes narrowed slightly as if she wanted to pierce through the barriers of space and see the appearance of the person advancing. In the distance, Yang Kai quickly suppressed the joy he was feeling after having successfully advanced and continued to receive the world energy baptism. The baptism a cultivator would go through when he or she broke through by a great realm was very rare. Besides cleansing a cultivator's body and soul, it could also help the cultivator's body and soul reach a higher level. What's more, the energy had the charm of heavenly way martial Dao in it. If the cultivator could glimpse one or two things from it, he or she would have gained a lifetime of benefits. Furthermore, the realm Yang Kai broke through to was the Dao source realm. He might have the opportunity to catch a glimpse at the principles from the baptism. Naturally, Yang Kai wanted to glimpse at space principles. He had already mastered it. What he needed was to comprehend these principles even more thoroughly. As Yang Kai stopped howling, the world energy continued to madly pour into him. Yang Kai continued sitting cross-legged in his place. His face was as tranquil as a dried-up ancient well. Unimaginable amounts of world energy poured into his body, solidifying the foundation of his Dao source realm while also tempering his body and source qi. Taking advantage of the sliver of mystique martial Dao attached to the energy, Yang Kai was soon immersed in comprehending the space principles. Time slowly trickled down. After half a day, the black funnel in the sky finally disappeared and the dark, hazy sky was clear again. Even so, many cultivators spectating from the distance still couldn't catch a glimpse of Yang Kai's face, as the space within a range of a couple thousand meters of him was extremely distorted. It seemed to have been disturbed by some force. Those cultivators believed it to be because of the huge movements caused by his breakthrough. All of them were tongue-tied. However, after realizing that there was nothing more to watch, and nothing to gain, they left one after another. But the Qin family group remained as they continued to watch from a distance. In a flash, more than 10 days had passed. Yang Kai, who had been sitting cross-legged all the while, finally opened his eyes, which flickered with an electric glow from the huge harvest he gained. Immediately after, he flicked his hand as his eyes regained their clarity. Suddenly, the chaotic space within several thousand meters of him calmed down. Nothing strange could be found. Yang Kai pursed his lips into a smile at the sight of this. At the same time, the face of Qin Yu, who had been paying rapt attention to this side all the while, suddenly grew solemn. She opened and closed her pretty eyes as her pupils instantly turned purple. Incomprehensible purple rhymes flowed in her eyes as if she was casting some secret technique. Her purple pupils added a touch of coquettishness to her slender figure. As she stared into the distance, faint purple beams suddenly shot out from her eyes, shuttling through the void. Yang Kai in the distance seemed to have sensed something. He turned his head and looked in Qin Yu's direction. Suddenly, the demon eye of annihilation appeared in his left eye and a golden beam filled with endless majesty shot out. The two gazes clashed with each other in the air, and Yang Kai couldn't help but let out a soft exclamation. He instantly retracted the demon eye of annihilation as his eyes became peaceful again. On the other side, Qin Yu screamed in shock. Her tender body uncontrollably retreated several steps back as her face suddenly grew pale. "Young lady!" The Qin family's middle-aged man was struck with panic. He immediately flashed to Qin Yu's side and reached out to support her. He then asked, concerned, "Young lady, are you okay?" He hadn't noticed Qin Yu's movements just now. All he thought was that her old illness had relapsed. Qin Yu's forehead was drenched in a cold sweat. Meanwhile, her purple pupils slowly disappeared. She shook her head and replied, "I'm all right." She continued to gaze in Yang Kai's direction, but she was surprised to find that no one was there. Heaven knows when Yang Kai had disappeared. "It's him?" Qin Yu murmured to herself. Apparently, when she had just used the secret technique, she had caught sight of Yang Kai's appearance. Suddenly, she recalled that she had met with this man on the first floor of the five-colored treasure pagoda. Furthermore, she had also told him how to find the entrance to the second floor. "Who?" the middle-aged man asked, astounded. Qin Yu, on the other hand, smiled before she shook her head and said, "It's nothing." After a pause, she said again, "Let's go back." The middle-aged man furrowed his brow. He vaguely found his young lady's behavior a little weird, but he couldn't ask too many questions. All he could do was escort Xianxia back to Maplewood City with the others. 100 kilometers away from the barren hill where Xianxia had advanced, Xianxia's figure blurred into existence. He stood there quietly, waiting for a while. Soon, the queen monster insect and the blue flame thunder wolf caught up to him from behind. Xianxia glanced at them before he put them away. Then, he determined his bearing and disappeared from this place. Only a sliver of faint space force fluctuation remained where he stood. After 2 days, Xianxia returned to the Yuan Furnace Mountain. The current Yuan Furnace Mountain was in ruins. The mountain had collapsed and its rubble was lying everywhere. Furthermore, there were signs of someone digging. This should be the handiwork of raging fire temple disciples. Xianxia didn't care about this. He hovered in the sky and silently sensed for a moment. He could sense that Lu Yen was still lying in a peculiar slumber somewhere underground. Heaven knows how deep. She seemed to be absorbing the scorching power in the underground magma pool compared to before. Lu Yan's current aura was a lot stronger. She was even showing faint signs of being on the verge of breaking through to the Tao Source realm. Xianxia looked happy after sensing this and immediately withdrew his divine sense, lest he disturbed Lu Yen. He then looked around for a while before he found a secluded location and sat down cross-legged. He was waiting for Lu Yen. After all, Lu Yen had been in the magma pool for a long time. She might return any time. After pondering for a bit, he summoned the sealed world bead and entered it with a flash. Just as he stepped into the small sealed world, Xianxia felt a little out of place. This out-of-place feeling wasn't from a change in the small sealed world but in himself. Before he wasn't strong enough and was unable to touch the principles, so he didn't notice it. But now that he had advanced to the Tao Source realm and could mobilize the world principles for his own use, Xianxia immediately noticed that the small sealed world's principles were short of something. He sensed it for a long time but was unable to find any clue and could only give up in light of this. With a flash, he arrived next to his embodiment. Since coming to Maplewood City and teaching his embodiment the heaven-devouring battle law, Xianxia had not paid attention to it anymore. When he checked it out now, Xianxia couldn't help but be taken aback. Because the original behemoth had shrunk several dozen times. The place where the embodiment sat was filled with broken pieces of rocks and dust. Obviously, its enormous body had been significantly tempered through cultivating the heaven-devouring battle law. Although it had grown smaller, it was more solid and firm. The heaven-devouring battle law could devour the world energy from everything in heaven and earth, and use it to strengthen one's own body, which perfectly complemented the inherent divine ability of the stone puppet family. The current embodiment was only a few stories tall, and even then it was still pretty big. The various ores that Xianxia had given it before had been devoured clean by it, eliminating all the waste and transforming the rest into a part of its strength. Because it wasn't a body of flesh and blood, Xianxia was unable to sense the vitality of the embodiment. He had no idea how much strength it could bring out. However, Xianxia could tell that it would not be too weak. While he was thinking this, the embodiment seemed to have sensed it. It opened his eyes as a smile appeared on its silly face. It then asked in a muffled voice, "Want to give it a try?" "All right." Xianxia tilted his head as he beckoned to embodiment. The embodiment gave a strange smile before it slowly got up. As it stood up, many pieces of rocks and dust accumulated over its body fell down. Because the embodiment was a product of Xianxia integrating his soul clone into the stone puppet, Xianxia could clearly understand its thoughts and control its actions. The embodiment wasn't just an individual, but also Xianxia's soul clone. With a flash of thought, Xianxia let the embodiment freely make its move. The next moment, the embodiment strode forward, creating deafening rumbles. It quickly arrived before Xianxia, bent its waist and suddenly sent a left uppercut completely parallel to the ground. The punch hadn't even made contact, but the wind from it made Xianxia's robe flap continuously. In addition, the fist energy shooting out from the fist actually left a deep arc-shaped gully on the ground. Xianxia's pupils shrunk at the sight of this. At first, he was only planning to use about 60% of his strength. But he immediately raised his strength to 100% as he also threw a punch to greet the oncoming punch. Boom! The enormous and the small fists clashed with each other with a heaven-shaking explosion. A burst of energy suddenly spread outward with the point of contact of the two fists as the center, like a round sharp blade, cutting the space in half. The embodiment grinned as a strange smile appeared on its face. Yang Kai's face, on the other hand, sank. The next moment, he felt an unmatched power coming from his right side. He immediately let out a muffled groan as he was sent flying. His figure disappeared in the blink of an eye. Yang Kai completely lost in a competition of pure strength. The embodiment finally stood up, put his hand on his forehead as if he was looking into the distance, and frivolously whistled. Suddenly, Yang Kai's figure appeared with a flash. He grimaced in pain, shaking his right fist. His right fist was completely mangled. Even his bones were showing. "How was it?" the embodiment asked, laughing. "Why are you asking when you already know the answer?" Yang Kai couldn't help but roll his eyes at it. The birth of the embodiment was a coincidence, and its strength was also an extremely lucky encounter. Had the second puppet been born with sentience, he would not have thought of putting his soul clone into it, turning it into his own embodiment, and had it not been for opportunity on the floating continent, his embodiment would not have grown so quickly. Because it had refined the entire floating continent, it could grow to this terrifying level in such a short time. That one punch from embodiment was equal to the power of a world. Even though Yang Kai had a strong and robust physical body, how could he withstand the bombardment of a continent with a body of flesh and blood? It wasn't surprising to be sent flying and even get injured. "You should find me a stick like Xiao Zhao's." The embodiment pursed its lips into a smile. If it had a heaven-shaking pillar-like artifact in its hands, the embodiment could take 10 enemies alone without using much of its strength. Furthermore, he could do it better than Xiao Xiao. "Sure, if there is a chance." After nodding his agreement, Yang Kai's figure suddenly blurred as he arrived above the embodiment and whipped a kick down with a turn of his body. His leg was wrapped in extremely berserk source chi. Obviously, Yang Kai wasn't showing any mercy. The embodiment didn't panic or anything at the sight of this. It just horizontally raised its hand, defending from the above, while it used the other enormous hand to grab toward Yang Kai, through under its armpit. Yang Kai's pupils immediately shrunk as he shouted aloud, "Solidify!" Just as his voice fell, the surrounding space came under the effect of the principles with a hum, solidifying immediately. The embodiment's movement slowed down a little as its vast body was suffering quite a bit of hindrance. Its enormous hands reaching out to Yang Kai was no longer as fast as before. Its body sank as it let out a cry, "Break!" Its giant-like body erupted with an explosive chi. Crack! With a crisp cracking sound, the solidified space suddenly became loose. It forcefully broke through the space principle suppression using brute force before it continued to grab at Yang Kai. Yang Kai didn't dare to go forward anymore. He pushed his feet as a deafening clap rang from underneath his feet. His figure instantly shot toward the back like an arrow fired from a bow. Immediately after, he brought his hands together as an enormous moon blade suddenly appeared, which he then fired straight at the embodiment without any scruples. A pitch-black, machete-like, enormous moon blade cut straight toward the embodiment's arm. The embodiment's pupil immediately shrank. It promptly switched from grabbing to punching, with the ferocity of a tiger. Immediately, explosive fist energy flew out of the punch, crashing into the moon blade in the air before it could even land on the embodiment's fist. The next moment, a deafening clap rang as the moon blade disappeared, and so did the fist energy. Before Yang Kai could regain his wits, the embodiment stamped his feet as a pillar of soil shot out from the ground. The embodiment reached out, and as it grabbed it, the pillar of loose soil turning into a stick as hard as iron with a glimmer. The embodiment, grabbing the tens of meters long stick, hurled it straight toward Yang Kai. The stick cut through the air with a sharp boom. It gave the impression that it would pierce through space. Yang Kai's expression drastically changed. He didn't dare to remain in his position. Space force fluctuations emerged around him as he teleported to one side, causing the stick to hit the air. Heh heh heh. The embodiment seemed to have expected this already. There was no panic on its face. Rather, it broke into a peal of strange laughter as it bent down and placed its enormous hand on the ground. The next moment, the ground started rumbling and quaking. Suddenly, earth dragons wagging their tails emerged just below Xianxia, one after another. Each and every earth dragon was extremely vivid and lifelike. Bearing their fangs and claws, they swarmed at Xianxia. By rough count, there were at least a dozen or so earth dragons. They had sealed Xianxia's all routes of escape. Dragon transformation! Xianxia shouted as he prompted the golden divine dragon source in his body. His right arm suddenly doubled in size, covered in dragon scales made from energy. His right hand resembled a dragon's claw. He then turned around and charged straight into the thunder of earth dragons. Very soon, deafening roars and explosions rang as the earth dragons collapsed, one after another. Soon after, Xianxia's figure shot from the dust-filled sky like a god descending from heaven. His body was surrounded by a colorful halo as 5 elements sword cheese shot towards the embodiment. The embodiment just curled its lips and stomped its foot on the ground at the sight of this. Suddenly, a wall of soil popped up from before him. Just like the stick before, a glimmer spread across the wall of soil before it became extremely hard. Chi chi chi. The sword cheese struck the wall of soil, but they were unable to break through its defense and were blocked. When the sword chi was finally exhausted, the embodiment waved its hand as the wall of soil before him collapsed. But before he could make any more moves, a strange smile suddenly appeared on Xianxia's face as his left eye glimmered with a golden glow. "Damn it!" the embodiment blurted out. It hurriedly tried to look away, but it was too late. When it saw that golden light, his attention was sucked in right away by it. It was unable to think, and its eyes lost their luster. After a short while, the golden light dissipated as the embodiment finally regained its wits. Xianxia was standing before it with a depressed look on his face. The moment the pair of small and big eyes looked at each other, they couldn't help but break into laughter. After a long time, their laughter slowly stopped. "Not a word about this to anyone," Xianxia solemnly exhorted. The embodiment nodded earnestly with an identical look on its face. If the word got out that he was ultimately forced to use the demon eye of annihilation to gain the upper hand against himself after having tried every possible means and ability, everyone would laugh at him. But this way, Xianxia was able to judge the embodiment's strength a little. With his current means, he had no good way to deal with the embodiment apart from using the divine sense to suppress it. The embodiment's divine sense was inferior to his, which it was a matter of course. It was originally his soul clone, so how could it compare with the main soul? Using the soul to suppress it was tantamount to cheating. He might as well order it to lie on the ground and let him beat it. Xianxia felt ashamed as these thoughts crossed his mind. "Do you have any extra artifacts?" the embodiment suddenly asked. "I do." Xianxia nodded as he doubtfully looked at it. However, a notion flashed his mind as he understood why the embodiment wanted the artifact. He immediately asked in surprise, "Can heaven-devouring battle law also devour artifacts?" The embodiment replied, "I'm just guessing. Whether it can or not, I will know it after giving it a try." Xianxia nodded after hearing this. He then searched through the space ring, found a few artifacts before throwing them at it. These artifacts belonged to Shin-Tu and his team. All the previous loot had been exchanged for source crystals at the black market of Maplewood City. After receiving the artifacts, the embodiment immediately sat down on the ground with the artifacts in its palm. Right then, he reported in a muffled voice, "The seed you had planted seems to have sprouted." Xianxia was stunned, but he soon understood what the embodiment was talking about, and a joyous look appeared on his face before his figure disappeared from his place. And when he reappeared again, he was in the vicinity of the medicine garden. There were only 2 things in the entire medicine garden. One was the immortal tree that Xianxia had obtained in his home star field in the past, and the other was the gold and silver-colored wood spirit seed that Xianxia planted in the corner that day. Yang Kai had tried to refine the immortal tree but ultimately failed. Finally, all he could do was plant it in the small sealed world's medicine garden. However, the small sealed world had gained a lot of vitality because of the immortal tree. In the past, Yang Kai had asked Yang Yan about how to refine the immortal tree and gain the immortal and indestructible body. However, Yang Yan didn't tell him clearly. This made him very helpless. Later, he acquired the wood spirit seed after killing the wood spirit. Because this seed was so peculiar that even Lu Yen couldn't burn it, Yang Kai had decided to keep it. It had only been about a year since he killed the wood spirit. And to his surprise, the wood spirit seed had already taken the root in the medicine garden and had grown into a 3-centimeter tall seedling. Just like the seedling had both silver and gold color, each occupying half. It looked very strange. It was completely different from the wood spirit's original body. Yang Kai had no idea why this was the case. Yang Kai stared at the 3-centimeter tall seedling in a daze. He didn't recognize it, so he had never even heard or read about it. But he could feel a strange energy in the seedling that was still very weak. But if the seedling continued to grow, it would definitely become stronger. This 3-centimeter tall seedling should not be underestimated. Even after being planted in the medicine garden of the small sealed world for nearly a year, it had only grown by this much. The medicine garden in the small sealed world had heavy earth, 5 earth vein crystals, and the vitality brought by the immortal tree. Being planted in here for a day was equivalent to 100 days outside. In other words, if it was planted elsewhere, even if the wood spirit seed could survive, it would take at least 100 years to grow 3 centimeters tall. Having thought this, Yang Kai became even more interested in the gold and silver seedling. The harder it was for it to grow, the higher its value would be. Just take the immortal tree, for instance. It had survived countless eras but was only 3 meters tall. After confirming that the wood spirit seed was still alive, Yang Kai didn't pay much attention to it. Yang Kai would have to observe and investigate what its uses were later. Next, he refined the long sword artifact used by Han Lang and the Flying St. Palace's ship in the small sealed world. The long sword artifact was a low-rank Dao source grade artifact. It just so happened that it was perfect for him at the moment. Could increase his strength a bit. And if supplemented by the 5 elements indestructible sword chi, it could even turn into his ace in the hole. As for the ship, it was naturally a means of transportation. In a flash, over a month had gone by. Yang Kai left the small sealed world and checked Lu Yan's situation again, but discovered that she was still in deep slumber. He had no idea what time she would wake up. Yang Kai furrowed his brow. After thinking for a moment, he summoned the ship and flew toward Maplewood City. He was unable to determine when Lu Yan would come out, and it would be a waste of time if he continued to wait here. In any case, Lu Yan knew that he was in Maplewood City. After exiting, she could join him in Maplewood City. Now, he needed to rush back to the cave mansion in Maplewood City to prepare to refine the dragon bone sword into his body. Yang Kai was finally back at Maplewood City after a few days. Yang Kai didn't have the time to go and inform Kong Si, ran about his safety after entering the city gate. Rather, he hurried back to the cave mansion he had rented before. Yang Kai took out the token and poured his source chi into it, trying to deactivate the cave mansion's barrier. But what left him in a great shock was that the cave mansion's barrier didn't respond at all. It was as if his token was useless. This made him furrow his brow, but very soon he recalled a matter. When he arrived at Maplewood City, he had rented the cave mansion for about a year, and counting the days, this 1-year period seemed to have been over 2 months ago already. Once the deadline passed, the right to use the cave mansion would naturally be withdrawn. Yang Kai's heart started pounding as he realized that something was wrong. He didn't care about the ending of the cave mansion's lease. It wasn't a big deal as he could go to the city lord's mansion to register and rent another one. It was just a matter of source crystals. He also hadn't kept anything valuable in the cave mansion, so he wasn't worried too much about it either. However, before he left, the little girl of the Zhang family was still in the cave mansion. Back when he left with Kong Si ran for the Yuan Furnace Mountain to explore Gong Sun Mu's cave mansion. Such a long delay had never crossed his mind. He believed that they would return relatively quickly. He didn't even explain anything to Zhang Ruoxi before leaving. He only told her that he was going out on a trip and left her here alone. Now, the lease of the cave mansion had already expired. His right to use the cave mansion had been withdrawn. But what about Zhang Ruoxi? Yang Kai looked left and right, but he couldn't find that delicate figure. He couldn't help but be anxious. When he left, Zhang Ruoxi was only a first-order Saint King. In Maplewood City, where snakes and vipers crept among the dragons, she had no power to protect herself. If she was targeted by someone with malicious intentions, the consequences would be disastrous. She could have gone back to the Zhang family herself? Yang Kai murmured to himself. If he was in Zhang Ruoxi's place, he would have returned to the Zhang family first if the right to use the cave mansion was withdrawn and he was expelled from the cave mansion. In that case, he wouldn't be worried about anything. The Zhang family might not be strong, but they still had 2 Origin King Realm Masters. Just when Yang Kai was in a hopeless tangle, the barrier next to him suddenly fluctuated. Yang Kai was stunned. He turned his head to look and discovered that the cave mansion's door had actually opened as a pretty young woman came out. The young woman seemed to be in her 30s. She suspiciously asked, looking at Yang Kai with extreme vigilance, "Who are you?" Yang Kai hastily cupped his fists and introduced himself. "This one's Yang Kai, this cave mansion's previous owner." The young woman furrowed her brow and stated, "I am renting this cave mansion now. There was nothing inside when I came in." "I know. I'm not here to find something." Yang Kai smiled. He tried his best to be gentle. "You are not here for anything?" The young woman, on the other hand, grew even more suspicious at the sight of this. "Then what are you doing here?" "I'm looking for someone, a young girl to be exact." Yang Kai hurriedly explained himself. "She should have been here, but I can't find her." "Madam, have you seen her?" Hearing that Yang Kai was looking for someone, the young woman furrowed her black brow. Her expression changed ever so slightly, but she hurriedly shook her head and replied, "I have not seen her." While speaking, she retracted her head and closed the door at the same time. "Wait!" Seeing this, Yang Kai immediately understood that she must know something. Or else, why would she retreat like this? He immediately reached out and blocked the door. The young woman's expression worsened drastically. She screamed, "What do you want? Don't forget, this is Maplewood City." Yang Kai let out a cold snort as he teleported into the cave mansion right away before closing the doors. He then stared at her coldly as a fearsome aura suddenly erupted from him, pressing down on the young woman right away. Dao Source Realm. Sensing Yang Kai's fearsome aura, the young woman's face suddenly turned pale as she blurted out in despair. The look in her eyes when she was looking at Yang Kai finally changed. The level of cultivators in Maplewood City wasn't generally that high. There weren't that many Dao Source Realm Masters, but they all had a great background that ordinary cultivators could never provoke. So, as soon as she noticed Yang Kai's cultivation realm, the young woman was a little flustered. She was only a first-order Origin King, that's all. How could she resist the pressure of a Dao Source Realm Master? She might be somehow holding on, but her body softened all of a sudden. She could only stop herself from falling after taking the support of the wall next to her. She nibbled on her red lips and begged, looking at Yang Kai pleadingly, "Little brother, you and I have no grievances. I have never offended you. Please don't make it difficult for me." "I'm not making it difficult for you." Yang Kai, maintaining a cold look, indifferently stated, "I only have a few questions. You have to answer them truthfully. If you dare to deceive me, I will make things so hard for you that you will beg me to kill you. You should know that I can indeed make it happen." The young woman nibbled her lips and gently nodded after hearing this. "Very well. Then tell me, have you seen that little girl?" Yang Kai focused his pair of eyes on the opposite party, making sure that he wouldn't miss the slightest change in her expression. The young woman pondered for a moment before she nodded with difficulty. "I don't know if that little girl I saw is the one you are looking for, but I have indeed seen a little girl at the cave mansion's door." "Tell me, what was her age, cultivation, and characteristic features?" Yang Kai hurriedly asked. "She was 16 or 17 years old. As for her cultivation, She was at the peak of the second-order Saint King realm and was on the verge of breaking through to the third-order Saint King realm. She looked a little weak. She was slender and spoke very softly. Her hair was black and straight. Yes, that's her. Yang Kai's eyes lit up immediately. He was sure that the girl this young woman had seen was Zhang Ruoxi. What he didn't expect was Zhang Ruoxi's cultivation to advance from the first-order Saint King realm to the peak of the second-order Saint King, just on the cusp of breaking through to the third order in just a year. I guess her aptitude isn't that bad. Of course, some part of the credit definitely belongs to the marrow washing pill. You said that you saw her at the gates of the cave mansion? What was she doing at the gates? Yang Kai asked again, frowning. The young woman replied, she was standing at the entrance? Standing? Yang Kai was confused. That's right. She was just standing there. When I rented this cave mansion 2 months ago, I found her at the entrance of the cave mansion. I didn't care much about it. Later, when I found her standing all the time there, I became curious. I asked her and she told me that she was waiting for Sir Yang. Little brother, you wouldn't happen to be that Sir Yang. While asking, the young woman timidly looked up at Yang Kai, and she was shocked to find Yang Kai dumbstruck. At this moment, Yang Kai's heart was crazily pounding. He couldn't help but imagine the scene where a 16, 17-year-old girl was standing quietly by the entrance of this cave mansion in Maplewood-like bustling city. She stood still there, withstanding the sun and winds, gazing left and right at the passing-by figures but never found the familiar figure she was waiting for. In a bustling city, she was like an abandoned kid, lonely, hesitant, and at a loss. When the night fell and the cold wind blew, she would curl on the ground, shivering, and when the sun rose again, she would open her eyes and continue to wait. An inexplicable heaviness burdened Yang Kai's heart. I found her pitiful. I even invited her to come in and sit down, but she didn't agree. She told me that she would stand there and wait. Sir Yang, little brother, I really didn't do anything to her. Don't make it harder for me. The young woman looked at Yang Kai with trepidation. She was afraid that Yang Kai would vent his anger on her. Since you haven't done anything to her, why didn't you tell me the truth in the first place? You wanted to seal the cave mansion instead when you heard me asking about her whereabouts. Obviously, you have a guilty conscience. Yang Kai coldly gazed at the young woman as his eyes flickered with intense murderous intent. The young woman seemed to have sensed it. She was struck with panic. She hurriedly waved her hands and justified herself. No, no, no. It's not what you think. I really haven't harmed her. So tell me, where is she now? By the look on your face, you seem to know something. Yang Kai's voice grew colder. The young woman shook her head. Yang Kai let out a chuckle. I guess you are afraid of something. Little brother, please don't force me. Please let me go. As long as you don't force me to do anything, I will do anything you want me to do. The young woman begged for forgiveness. While speaking, her expression turned a little coquettish as her pair of pretty eyes suddenly turned shiny. Yang Kai remained indifferent and unmoved. A strange power suddenly lingered around his fingertips as he asked with impatience in his voice, "Speak or die." While speaking, he slowly poked towards the young woman's forehead. Realizing Yang Kai to be iron-hearted, the young woman finally panicked and promptly answered, "Go to Zhang family. Perhaps you can find her there." Zhang family? Yang Kai's fingers stopped just 3 centimeters away from the young woman's forehead as the energy around the fingertips suddenly dissipated. He looked at the young woman and asked as if he was thinking something, "No wonder you were so afraid. So, it's the Zhang family. However, what does the Zhang family want with her?" "I don't know." The young woman shook her head. "1 month ago, several men came and talked to her. Then she left with those men. I was curious, so I secretly followed after them. I discovered them going into the Zhang family, but I don't know anything else. Even if you kill me, it will be useless." "She went with them on her own?" Yang Kai furrowed his brow. "Yes." The young woman nodded. "All right, madam. Thank you for telling me everything. Goodbye." Yang Kai cupped his fist and rushed out with a flash. After Yang Kai left, the young woman finally slumped on the ground like a puddle of mud. Her clothes were completely drenched in sweat. She wasn't from any sect or family, and was only able to cultivate the First Order Origin King realm by her own efforts and various opportunities. She had never come in contact with a Tao Source Realm Master, so after having been threatened at such close quarters by Yang Kai, she was frightened to death. Fortunately, Yang Kai was reasonable. He really hadn't done anything to her. If he had, she would be absolutely powerless to resist. After a long time, the young woman finally regained her wits. She fiercely stood up and hurriedly rushed into the cave mansion and started packing up her things. After a short while, the young woman left the cave mansion, made a beeline to the city gates, and very soon left Maplewood City. She didn't dare to remain in Maplewood City anymore. If the Jiang family men tracked her down, she would be in big trouble. As far as I know, the Jiang family men weren't as reasonable as that Sir Yang.